Chapter 158. No matter how much I dislike him, this crown prince seems to be ignorant of the sufferings of the outside world because he was brought up deep in the palace, but he still has some degree of sophistication. Yun Yang thought to himself, let's see what he does. It's best that he doesn't bother me. If he really does, I'll just go with the flow. The residence of Chiu Jianhan, who had only been separated from Yun Yang for a few days, had lost a lot of weight. It was one thing for Yun Yang to say it and another for him to prove that the emperor was poisoned. However, this was a serious matter after all. After discussing it with His Majesty, the old marshal decided to handle it properly. They could not just listen to what a junior like Yun Yang said. How could the situation be so dire when he said it was so critical? What if Yun Yang was exaggerating and was only trying to emphasize his own importance? Both His Majesty and the old marshal had thought of this. The greatest merit was to save the emperor. Helping the emperor to ease his condition and saving the emperor's life were two completely different concepts. Yutong's top miracle physician had come to the residence of Marshal during the few days when Yun Yang was filled with doubts. Holy hands Yucheshing. However, the world respectfully called him 3-inch Yu. 3-inch golden needles could save life and death. Within 3 inches it could save a person's life and death, break someone's life and death and save someone's life. The old miracle physician had saved the world with golden needles. He had been saving people for 70 years and his hair had turned white. This old man was Chiu Jianhan's sworn brother and one of the few people he trusted the most in this world. If it were not for old Marshal Chiu, the emperor himself might not have been able to invite old Yu. Even if old Yu had been willing to come, he would not have come so quickly. At this moment, His Majesty was lying on the bed in front of him. The old marshal looked anxiously at Yu Chexing, who was sitting in front of the bed. Yu Chexing's expression was extremely grim. The Way of Heaven physician was fully unleashed as a unique mystical qi filled with vitality flowed continuously through the emperor's meridians. After a long time, old Yu retracted his mystical qi and sighed softly. With a wave of his right hand, 108 golden needles filled the emperor from head to toe with a swoosh. In an instant, His Majesty had turned into a human-shaped hedgehog. Yu Chexing took a deep breath. However, at this moment, the godly doctor's face was covered in fine beads of sweat. Just this instant of moving the needle had consumed more than 95% of his Shen Qi. According to common sense, at this moment old man Yu should be meditating and adjusting his breathing, calming himself down. Consuming more than 90% of his profound energy in an instant would inevitably hurt any cultivator's vitality. Even if old man Yu's cultivation focused more on health, it was no exception. However, divine physician Yu forcefully took a deep breath, and his 10 fingers instantly turned into a ball of afterimages. On His Majesty's body he continuously poked, and shook. 108 needles were paired with 108 techniques in a complete cycle. The illusion suddenly disappeared. Yu Chexing's breathing grew heavier, but he did not slow down at all. Another golden needle appeared in his right hand. With a flash of cold light, it silently pierced through the tip of the emperor's left index finger. Buzz, buzz, buzz. When old man Yu's last golden needle pierced through the emperor's body, the originally motionless 108 golden needles trembled in unison, emitting a buzzing sound. Immediately, a black line visible to the naked eye flowed along the meridians in His Majesty's left hand, surging towards his index finger at an extremely fast speed. Finally, a drop of black blood rushed out of his body. Yu Chexing quickly caught it with a tiny jade bottle that was only the size of a finger. The golden needles suddenly trembled again, but the black line suddenly stopped and did not move. No, after a moment of stalemate, it actually began to slowly retreat. After another moment, the black line had already disappeared without a trace. His skin also returned to its original color, and there was nothing out of the ordinary. The golden needles continued to buzz, but His Majesty's body no longer moved. After a long time, the golden needles had calmed down completely. Yu Chexing was completely drained, sweating profusely. His breathing was labored and his vision was a little blurry. This was the aftereffect of exhausting a large amount of his mystical qi and forcefully sustaining the needles. The old divine physician forcefully controlled himself and removed all the golden needles from His Majesty's body. He did not even have the time to store them into the box before he fell to the ground, sweating profusely and looking pale. The golden needles that had just been removed scattered all over the ground. Chiu Jianhan was shocked. He went forward to support the emperor quickly and channeled a pure mystical qi slowly into Yu Chexing's meridians. The old marshal's mystical skill was different from old man Yu's, so he could not help old man Yu when he was performing the needles. However, the old marshal's skill was profound. Although it was twice the effort for half the result, it could still slightly replenish Old Man Yu's damaged energy. After some time, Yu Tiexing finally calmed down. His Majesty had already sat up from his bed, his gaze fixed on Yu Tiexing. His gaze could not hide the sadness that flowed from it. Although he tried his best to act like he did not care, he really could not do it. Even though he was an emperor throughout the ages. However, this poison that came from within the palace still made this brilliant emperor of a generation feel a bone-piercing pain. Yu Tiexing finally opened his eyes. His gaze was still filled with intense fatigue. "How is it?" Qiu Jianhan was hopeful. Yu Tiexing did not answer. He held the tiny jade bottle in his hand as white fog began to rise from his body. The unique mystical qi of the Way of Heaven's physician was activated once more. After a while he put the jade bottle down. Qiu Jianhan and His Majesty looked over and saw that the drop of blood in the jade bottle had disappeared. What replaced it were streaks of fog of various colors that lingered in the jade bottle. Looking at the colors and luster of the fog in the jade bottle, Yu Tiexing's expression grew increasingly grim. "There are a total of 12 colors?" Yu Tiexing sighed when he finally confirmed the composition of the poison. The old marshal was puzzled. "What do you mean? If there is only one color in this bottle, it means that this person is not poisoned. That is the color that a person should have. The more colors there are, the more types of poisons there are in the body." Yu Tiexing rubbed his temples in distress. "In other words, the poison that your Majesty has been inflicted with is not just one type of poison, but a mixture of poisons. It should be a type of medicine that is not harmful to the body, or even beneficial to the body if only one or a few types of medicines are taken. However, when these 12 medicines are combined together and fused over a long period of time, it has evolved into this kind of terrifying poison that is deadly enough to kill your Majesty." The old marshal and His Majesty's expressions changed at the same time. "This also means that your Majesty has to go through at least 11 processes to be poisoned. Moreover, it has to be consumed over a long period of time for this to happen." Yu Tiexing shook his head. How could such a ridiculous thing happen in the inner court of the palace? It's unbelievable and unimaginable. The old marshal and His Majesty were speechless. Both of their expressions changed at the same time because of this matter and the severity of it. If there was only one place where the poison had been placed, it would still be understandable. However, there were 11 places now. It was too terrifying. In other words, it was too horrifying. At least 11 types of medicinal items. If it were only one of them, it wouldn't be a big deal at all. However, when all 11 types of medicinal items are combined, the effect of the poison is even more terrifying than the shadowless poison that's known to be the most poisonous in the world. With your Majesty's cultivation base, even if you were to be poisoned by the shadowless poison, there's still room for recovery as long as you're treated in time and properly. However, this poison. Yu Tiexing sighed. Qiu Jianhan's expression changed abruptly. His face paled. The legendary shadowless poison would leave no shadow, no trace, and no trace. One would be poisoned without any discovery. When the poison fully erupted, it would turn the poisoned person into a cloud of smoke, and from then on, disappear from this world without a trace. This was the shadowless poison. It was also the poison that Tianshan continent's experts were famed for. It was also because of this that this poison was unrivaled in the poison of Tianshan continent. However, even such a potent poison could not compare to the poison that His Majesty was currently afflicted with. Can it be cured? The old marshal's voice was trembling. Yutong's top miracle physician, who had a way to deal with the shadowless poison, could not possibly be completely helpless. Yu Tiexing looked both mentally and physically exhausted. "I can't." Qiu Jianhan plopped down on the chair, dumbfounded. "Not only can it not be cured, there's something else." Yu Tiexing continued. "The complexity of this poison can be said to have reached a stage where it surpasses nature's workmanship. If I were to disregard my standpoint, this old man would covet this poison. However, it's because of this that this secret recipe alone isn't something an ordinary person can possess. To be able to possess such a recipe and be able to use it..." Yu Tiexing's facial muscles twitched. "This old man? Can't imagine what kind of force it is." His Majesty's expression was unruffled. Even at this moment he was still calm. He stood up quietly and said faintly, "I'm not afraid of death. Although it's a pity, this is fate. I can only let it go. However, the only thing that makes me feel heart-wrenching pain right now is the person who poisoned me." His Majesty wore an extremely tragic smile on his face. "The person who can do this and has the ability to do it must be one of the closest and most trusted people to me." He sucked in a deep breath. "Yutong." There's a war on the outside and a traitor on the inside. The west is barren for thousands of miles, there's no harvest, there's a drought. The south is flooded and the people have lost their homes. This country is about to fall apart. How can I leave like this without worry? How can I be willing to close my eyes just like this? His Majesty's eyes were filled with melancholy. Is there really no cure? There's not even a chance to try? The old marshal looked at Yu Tiexin hopelessly, feeling his heart trembling. Chapter 159. Yu Tiexin lowered his head dejectedly, not daring to look back at his old friend, old Marshal Qiu. He didn't say anything, but his attitude was more detailed than 1,000 words could be said. If you can't cure it, can't anyone else? The old marshal was unwilling to give up. Based on my knowledge of this poison, no one in this world can cure it. Even the person who poisoned me might not have the antidote. Yu Tiexin was certain of this judgment. This was the confidence that divine physician Yu had built up from his lifetime of practicing medicine. However, this confidence had dealt a hopeless blow to the old marshal. Amidst the silence, Yu Tiexin thought of something and said hesitantly, "There's one more thing. Your Majesty, please don't be too agitated." "What is it?" The Emperor's voice was calm. "Your Majesty has been poisoned for at least 10 years, and this poison has become one with the circulation of the profound qi in your meridians. In other words, this poison has already become a part of your body." Yu Tiexin stammered, not daring to say it out loud. However, he finally took a deep breath and said as if he was sacrificing himself for justice, "It's just that, during these 10 years if a child is born, a prince or a princess." The Emperor's expression changed abruptly. "What?" Yu Tiexin lowered his head. Although his voice was low, his enunciation was clear. "I'm afraid there might be something wrong." Boom. A table was smashed by the Emperor's palm. His Majesty's body shook violently as he vented his anger, almost fainting on the spot. The heavy blow finally made His Majesty feel like he was going to break down completely. There were many concubines in the palace. As a man in his prime who had normal needs and a strong mystical cultivation base, how could the Emperor be lacking in offspring during these 10 long years? In the past 10 years, there were more than 20 princes and princesses who were born one after another. If all these children... His Majesty dared not think further, his face draining of color. Qiu Jianhan stood in a daze before he sprung up abruptly. "Go. Invite young Master Yun. Ask him to come here immediately, no matter what he's doing." The old marshal's breathing was unprecedentedly rapid, his eyes bloodshot. He was in a state of near madness and collapse. Yun Yang's information had been verified, but the news was so unexpected. Initially, when Yun Yang had said in the palace that His Majesty's health was in danger, the old marshal had never thought that it was incurable, despite thinking that it was a serious matter. His greatest reliance was his sworn brother. The #1 miracle physician in the world, Yu Tiexin. Yun Yang was still a young man after all. Even if he had some experience and capability, his abilities were still shallow. Even if he was not exaggerating, the situation might not actually be that bad. As long as he found out that he was poisoned and knew what kind of poison it was there any poison in this world that Yu Tiexin could not cure? But reality proved that Yu Tiexin could not solve it. Furthermore, it was very likely that no one in the world could cure this poison. Now the old marshal's only hope was Yun Yang. This was the last straw of hope they had right now. When Yun Yang arrived, he saw the Emperor standing before the window with his arms behind his back. Qiu Jianhan and another person sat dumbly in the room, looking like they had lost their parents. "How is it?" Yun Yang asked with a smile. "Old sir must have something to ask me to come. What are you playing dumb for?" Old Marshal Qiu Jianhan pulled him over and slapped the back of his head, scolding, "Don't you know why I've asked you to come here? Quickly. Tell me what solution you have, or I'll kill you if you don't." Yun Yang rubbed the back of his head, speechless. "This is the first time I've seen someone beg with such an attitude, and it's happening to me." Yun Yang really wanted to turn and leave. He wanted to at least put on a show and delay the old marshal for a few days, to let this old man know why flowers were red and that Yun Yang's head should not be slapped. However, the person directly involved was His Majesty the Emperor. Even if this matter did not concern the Empire of Yutong, the fact that His Majesty the Emperor was the father of his eldest brother Supreme Earth made it impossible for him to not save him. Not only did he have to save him, he had to save him as soon as possible, with all his heart. Why does this feeling feel so? Will he have a solution? Yu Tiexin stared at Yun Yang suspiciously. What could this young man in front of him do when even he was helpless and sighed at the poison? Yun Yang sat down and said quietly, "Old Marshal, being impatient won't solve anything. What I need to know is, what's the outcome of these few days? Outcome? Incurable? A dead end? The old marshal blushed and was speechless for a long while. Strictly speaking, the old marshal could not be said to have done anything wrong. Yun Yang was still a child in the old marshal's eyes, a child who had just grown hair. Naturally, he had placed more hope on miracle physician Yu. After all, the one who was poisoned was His Majesty the Emperor, so the safest method was the priority. He could say this to anyone but to Yun Yang, the person in question. Alright, I told you about His Majesty the Emperor's condition out of goodwill and even gave the method of treatment, but you've forgotten about me in the blink of an eye and found someone else to treat him. You've tried 13 times but failed, and now you're thinking of me. What the F***ck is this? Yu Chexing did not know much about this. Hearing Yun Yang's question, he naturally explained the current situation in detail. The old sir had practiced medicine all his life. He was not a shallow person. His explanation was extremely detailed and meticulous. Then, Ling, the old marshal, was filled with anticipation. The medicine given by Ling Xiaozue was still in Yun Yang's hands. Before getting the confirmation from his old friend, the top miracle physician, how would the old marshal dare to simply use the medicine on His Majesty the Emperor? Don't worry, I've brought the medicine. It's right here. Yun Yang took out a jade bottle carefully. Inside it were 3 jade green medicinal pills. Each of them was the size of a lotus seed. The old marshal's eyes darted around, feeling that something was not right. The last time he showed them to this old man, they were only the size of soybeans. Why did they seem to have grown now? Could this old man have seen them wrongly? Yu Chexing took it. Once he opened the cap, he could smell the rich spiritual qi. Without another word, he took a deep breath and closed the jade bottle immediately. Then he closed his eyes. Great medicine. Truly great medicine. After a long while, Yu Chexing exhaled deeply and looked at the 3 pills enviously. May I ask, young brother, where did these 3 pills come from? Instead of calling them 3 pills, it's more like 3 lives. 3 lives? The old marshal perked up. What do you mean? These 3 pills aren't actually medicine. They don't even contain any medicinal ingredients. Yu Chexing said with a sigh, but they are the purest qi of life. Any one of these pills can bring a severely injured and dying person back to life. Yu Chexing said. Then, to His Majesty these 3 pills? The old marshal asked anxiously. This? Yu Chexing said, these 3 pills are undoubtedly very useful. They can really bring a person back from the brink of death. However, they can only increase the vitality of the user. In other words, they can only increase His Majesty's life force and strengthen his entire body. They aren't the antidote to the illness. I don't know if Elder Chiu can understand what I'm saying. The old marshal coughed, looking rather ashen as he said, I don't quite understand. These pills can't cure the illness, but they can increase His Majesty's body's resistance against the poison. Yu Chexing said, this also means that His Majesty can only hold on for about 2 months at most. However, with these 3 pills, His Majesty can at least hold on for another 3 years. 3 years? Qiu Jianhan looked disappointed. Could it only prolong his death by 3 years? Old Qiu, what kind of attitude is this? How would you know how bad His Majesty's physical condition is now? Even the most precious treasures of heaven and earth in this world can hardly prolong His Majesty's life. These 3 spiritual pills can prolong His Majesty's life for 3 years. It's already extremely precious. Actually, if His Majesty didn't have to work so hard, it wouldn't be a problem to hold on for another 5 or 10 years. However, the problem now is that His Majesty is so tired every day. If he continues to exhaust himself for so many years, even with the support of the spiritual pills, it won't last long. What's more, he's still poisoned and in constant danger. Yu Chexing sighed softly. His Majesty and old Marshal Qiu were silent as well. The nation's affairs were burdensome now, with internal and external troubles. Even though they were working so hard, they were merely treading on thin ice, afraid that something would go wrong and cause them to lose everything. How could it not be tiring under such circumstances? How could they let go of their busy duties and recuperate in peace? Anyone in the nation could let go of their duties, but not His Majesty. Well, Yin Yang coughed. These 3 people have all gone to study the effects of the pills. Is it really good to leave this brother aside? Could it be that her brother was not the most important? This brother is more useful than that medicine. His Majesty smiled faintly and said generously, if I could be given another 3 years, not only would it be a blessing from the heavens, it would be a destiny that defies the heavens. I should be content with what I have. His smile was filled with calmness and wisdom, without the slightest hint of fear. This emperor, the Emperor of Yutong, should be someone who cherished his life the most and feared death the most, but he was so open-minded now, long disregarding life and death. However, there was more to this smile than before. It was a hint of viciousness, a viciousness that came from deep within his bones. Well, I think... Yun Yang could not help but be shocked as he watched the three of them talk about how they were going to prepare for their funeral 3 years from now and begin their vengeance now. Chapter 160. What's wrong with you? Old Marshal Chiu glared at Yun Yang, obviously dissatisfied with the person's careless interruption that disregarded the occasion. Didn't they see that these people were so bold, ambitious, and arrogant? I just wanted to say that I can actually help His Majesty delay the situation with this medicinal pill. Yun Yang looked at Qiu Jianhan innocently. The mystical skill and mystical qi that I cultivate has a unique effect in resisting various poisons and substances in this world. As long as I comb through His Majesty's meridians every few days, the poison can be suppressed. I'm very confident about this. Wasn't it proven the other day? What? What did you say? Qiu Jianhan could not quite believe what he had just heard. Even his old brother, the unrivaled physician Yu Tiexin, whom he had high hopes for, was helpless against such a venomous poison. How dare you say that you can handle it? If you are so capable, why don't you ascend to the heavens? I'm speaking the truth. I've helped His Majesty comb through his meridians that day. Otherwise, do you think that His Majesty's intelligence is so clear now? It's because I've suppressed the poison that has invaded His Majesty's head that His Majesty has regained consciousness. Old Marshal, you can't erase such a huge contribution from me, Yun Yang said with a face full of grievance. The three of them were stunned when they heard him. Old Marshal Chiu recalled what had happened that day. His Majesty's mind had been muddled then, without the wisdom and decisiveness he was now. It was all because of Yun Yang's contribution. Did it not mean that things were not as hopeless as they seemed? Why didn't you say so earlier? It's such an important matter. Qiu Jianhan was enraged amidst his joy. Looking at the unreasonable old man, Yun Yang was speechless. Old Marshal, one has to be reasonable. I've told you about His Majesty's physical condition and countermeasures after I helped him comb through his body the other day, but you didn't say anything else. You only thought of me today. No, it wasn't me that you thought of, it was the 3 spiritual herbs. This is the 3rd time I've said it today. Yun Yang was speechless. You didn't? The old man was unreasonable. He immediately raised his hand, obviously intending to greet him with violence. Just pretend that you didn't say it? Just take it that I've forgotten to mention it? A wise man submits to circumstances. Yun Yang quickly corrected himself and apologized. It's a moment of carelessness on my part. You're a man of great virtue and seniority, then what are you waiting for, brat? Hurry up and come take a look at His Majesty. The old marshal blew at his beard. His face seemed to have turned red as well. Perhaps he was a little embarrassed or something, but it was not obvious. Yun Yang chuckled dryly. Looking at Yu Tiexin, who was already laughing by the side, and His Majesty the Emperor, whose eyes were filled with mirth, he nodded and bowed in agreement. Then he stood up. He really couldn't afford to offend this old man. Let me try your mystical skill and mystical qi first to get a feel for it. Yu Tiexin extended his hand. Yun Yang knew that there must be a reason for this old man to do so. He was an expert in the medical field. His considerations must be thorough. He did not object, nor did he mind it. Instead, he channeled his unique mystical qi and circulated it through Yu Tiexin's meridians. Yu Tiexin's expression had already changed greatly before he had even completed one round. His eyes widened abruptly as he stared at Yun Yang, almost crying out in surprise. All right, that's enough, that's enough. Yu Tiexin was trembling all over, his gaze towards Yun Yang burning with passion. Your Majesty, old marshal. Yu Tiexin deliberated over his words and said after a while, with these 3 medicinal pills and young Master Yun's mystical skill, you only need to consume them one by one over 3 months. Young Master Yun, will then circulate his qi on the side. The poison in your Majesty's body, at the very least, the most conservative estimate. He paused and said, at least for the next 5 years, there's no need to worry too much. Even if you use mystical qi occasionally, it's no big deal. Besides, if young Master Yun's cultivation base can improve in the future, or if His Majesty's poison can be slowly removed through young Master Yun's unique mystical skill, completely cured. He heaved a long sigh of relief. Yutong's fortune. The world's fortune. With that, His Majesty could not help but be delighted, even though he had long disregarded his own life and death. No matter how open-minded one was, as long as one could live, who would really want to die? As for old Marshal Chiu, he was overjoyed. If he had not restrained himself, he might have been dancing with joy. He took a step forward and patted Yun Yang's shoulder. "Good lad, you're so capable. You'll be the Empire of Yutong's national treasure in the future." Yun Yang moved behind His Majesty and secretly rolled his eyes for a while before he began the treatment. National treasure? This elder brother is a national treasure. His Majesty, who had consumed a pill and was cleared by Yun Yang's endless divine art, stood up in high spirits, feeling unprecedentedly relaxed. He said in a refreshed manner, "It looks like I'm not fated to die yet. There will always be a savior from heaven." His Majesty had actually started joking. Qiu Jianhan felt a huge weight lift off his shoulders. "Still, Your Majesty shouldn't be too careless," Yu Tiexin said. "You have to be careful during this period of time, especially when it comes to your diet. If the person who poisoned you finds out that Your Majesty has taken a turn for the better, he might change his strategy. The enemy will always be in the light while we're in the dark. It's impossible to guard against it." The old miracle physician had not finished his words. However, both the old marshal and His Majesty understood what he meant. His Majesty nodded faintly and said in a low voice, "Of course I understand." These 5 short words were enough to send shivers down Yu Tiexian's spine, even though he was used to life and death, as well as Lord Supreme Cloud, who spent his days in front of the gates of hell. On the same night, a case of treason had suddenly broken out in the palace. There were more than 300 eunuchs and 100 maids in the palace, including all the chefs in the imperial kitchen and even the emperor's 3 favorite concubines, as well as many eunuchs and maids in the imperial study and bedchamber, as well as the families of the 3 favored concubines. All of them had been captured in one fell swoop. All of them were pushed out of the Meridian Gate and executed in public. There were more than 8,000 people who had died in this wave. This wave of unforeseen events could be said to be huge, but the most incredible thing about this incident was the strength of the counterattack against the target. First, when the imperial guards were trying to arrest a few eunuchs in the palace, they were unexpectedly met with strong resistance. Among them, there were 7 or 8 eunuchs who had extraordinary skills of the 5th or 6th grade. After a fierce battle, the imperial guards who went to arrest them paid the price of a large number of casualties before they were able to capture all of them. No, they did not manage to capture all of them. There were still 3 who had relied on their formidable abilities to break through the siege and escape with wounds all over their bodies. A few of the maids by the side of the 3 favored concubines were quite skilled as well. After the siege, one of them managed to break through the siege while the others were killed on the spot after a fierce battle. There were also the families of the 3 favored concubines. 2 of them were captured as they were caught off guard, while the other family had a private army of thousands of men. They fought head-on against the imperial guards who came to capture them. Not only did they not lose the upper hand, they even seemed to be on the offensive. It was only when the city guards mobilized 30,000 soldiers that the entire family was annihilated. After the battle, the entire capital city was plunged into an atmosphere of blood. The unprecedentedly thick stench of blood did not dissipate even after many days had passed. When His Majesty was enraged, corpses were everywhere and blood flowed like a river. The entire capital city was trembling. All the civil and military officials held their breaths. No one dared to act rashly. This so-called rebellion came so suddenly that it was extinguished like a thunderbolt. The 4th prince entered the palace to pay his respects. He did not have anything to do at first, but he did not know why he asked about this matter. His Majesty said darkly, "My son is quite concerned about this matter. I wonder which of your loyal subordinates' interests have been touched? You actually have to trouble me to ask about it personally. Since you are so concerned about it, why don't you take my throne? Do I need you to ask about how I do things? After you ask, do you need to reason with it and control it?" Faced with such sharp words, the 4th prince fled from the palace, drenched in sweat and scared out of his wits. Even after he left the palace and returned to his mansion, his lips were still green and his face was pale. This time he was really frightened and fell ill after he returned home. The meaning of His Majesty's words was not only a heavy threat, but the core of it was a direct attack on the heart. Almost all the personnel in the imperial palace had undergone a complete change of blood. On the 2nd day, the new head chef of the imperial kitchen seemed to have offended His Majesty's taboo. His Majesty flipped the dining table, flew into a rage and beheaded him in public. Then in the afternoon, another head chef was appointed. It was said that the Empress had pleaded for mercy for one of the concubines. His Majesty looked at the Empress coldly for a long time. Then, the Empress was grounded and had not left the Longevity Palace until now. It was also said that she would probably not be able to come out for a year after this. Only half of them have been chopped off this time. One night after the incident, His Majesty met old Marshal Chiu in secret and said frankly, "As for the others, I know who they are. But I can't do anything now." Chiu Jianhan comforted him, "Your Majesty, it's already a joyous occasion that your dragon body is safe and sound. There will be plenty of opportunities to settle scores with these fellows in the future. There's no need to rush. It's not good to startle them." Chapter 161. As His Majesty enjoyed young Master Yun's mystical massage, he suddenly had the urge to test him. Yun Yang say, "The treasury is empty now. Not only are the military's rations and rewards insufficient, but the flood also requires a large amount of silver taels for relief. How should this be handled?" Yun Yang was still thinking about the portrait in His Majesty's study. Feeling guilty, he answered instinctively, "What's so difficult about this? As long as we do this and so on, everything can be easily solved. Besides, His Majesty's butcher's knife is hanging in the air. Whoever dares to jump out to oppose is someone who deserves to die. It's just the right time to start with them. I believe that the person who jumps out will not be clean himself. Confiscating his family's wealth will be of some help this time as well." His Majesty and old Marshal Chiu looked at each other subconsciously as they listened to Yun Yang's suggestion, noticing the surprise in each other's eyes. This child's plan was brilliant. He could actually grasp the imperial court's affairs so precisely? His methods were ruthless, going straight for the vital points. What a talent. There was also the last part about copying the wealth of those who didn't make a name for themselves. It was simply the finishing touch. It was truly amazing. "Yun Yang, do you have the intention to enter the imperial court as an official?" His Majesty asked, seemingly unintentionally. "No." Yun Yang was shocked. "If I were to become an official, I'm afraid I would be beheaded by His Majesty within a few days. This nephew's ability to offend people is truly extraordinary. Becoming an official is equivalent to getting into trouble. It's better to save this trouble." His Majesty and old Marshal Chiu laughed together. Both of them were not offended by Yun Yang's rejection. They even thought that Yun Yang's answer was reasonable. Thinking about it, this fellow was indeed not suitable to be an official. If he were to be placed in front of others, he would be targeted by those with ulterior motives. Thus, they gave up on the idea of Yun Yang becoming an official or enlisting him. The next morning. The morning assembly. His Majesty had indeed brought up two matters. First, the soldiers' salaries, pensions and rewards. Second, the funds related to the flood. The Board of Revenue's Minister of Revenue, who had heard of these two huge issues, almost went mad. "Your Majesty, you only have so little money now. It's not enough no matter how you deal with it. Even if a copper coin was broken into 8 pieces, it still wouldn't be enough." Therefore, a group of civil officials immediately jumped out and said that the country's affairs are the most important and the people are the most important. I believe that the soldiers will understand if they suffer for a few months first. In the past, this was only the beginning of the daily quarrel. However, the emperor today was very different from the past. All of you only need to say a number. Of course, do not shake the foundations of your families. If that happens, I won't be able to rest easy. Just do what you can. The officials were dumbfounded. This did not seem to be the right way to open it today. It had been close to 5 years since His Majesty had used such a ruthless tactic. What he did today was not just a ruthless tactic, but a hooligan's trick. Forcefully carrying out the emperor's decision. Not to be denied. Not to be denied. You don't agree, do you? Fine, men, behead him and confiscate his property. All of your property is gone, your life is gone too. Then carry out the next person's donation. Will you donate? Yes, His Majesty has succeeded. If you don't donate? Alright, have you seen the 2 examples? Do you want to lose your wealth, your family, and be cursed as a thief? If you don't want to stay, then just give in and listen to me. This official is willing to donate 1,000,000 silver taels. Old Marshal Chiu Jianhan was the first to jump out. This official is willing to donate 1,000,000 silver taels. Lung Daoyin jumped out. This official is also willing to donate 1,000,000 silver taels. The Grand Commandant jumped out. All of the officials rolled their eyes at him. These 3 old ruffians were King annoying. Who didn't know the backgrounds of the 3 of them? Although the salaries of these 3 brothers were not low and there were other benefits, most of their money had been used to help the disabled soldiers and orphans of the martyrs. Where did you get so much money? What right did you have to ask for 1,000,000 silver taels? If you're so capable, why don't you go to heaven? It's not that we're looking down on you, but if the three of you old men could gather 500,000 silver taels, we'd be willing to hang ourselves together. This was obviously His Majesty's request. However, by doing so, you forced us into a tight corner. The three of you are indeed my left and right arms. I'm very comforted. His Majesty was delighted. This old official has little money. I don't have much savings in recent years. I'll just donate 500,000 silver taels. The Grand Preceptor sighed softly. On the military side, there were already 3 magnates taking the lead. Their momentum was unparalleled. If there was no one among the civil officials to set an example, then, in the imperial court, would it not be one-sided and the words of the military would be the law? Furthermore, it would be one-sided with His Majesty's inclination. This could not be allowed. No matter how reluctant the Grand Preceptor was, he had still taken the lead and pledged 500,000 silver taels. This official will donate 100,000 silver taels. This official will donate 200,000 silver taels. This was the idea that Yun Yang had thought of last night. Your Majesty can do this. Bring up the issue of the Treasury's insufficiency in the morning assembly and someone will definitely jump out to stir up trouble. Your Majesty can get rid of this troublemaker. Then confiscate his family's assets and confiscate it from the Ministry of Revenue. Then you can propose a donation from the officials. I believe there will still be someone who will jump out to stir up trouble. This person's position is good. If your Majesty doesn't want to kill him, you only have to reprimand him. However, if it's someone who is ignorant and coincidentally someone whom your Majesty wants dead, your Majesty can kill another one then. As long as the 2 old marshals are willing to act as a pawn, this will be a success. At least this method can solve the urgent problem. There are many wealthy officials in the imperial court. Who isn't afraid of death? How many people can really sacrifice their lives over their wealth? I remember your Majesty using this method before. The Emperor's expression had darkened for a long time then. He had indeed used this method before. However, how could His Majesty stand it when this child brought it up so bluntly? He wanted to save face as well. That was why His Majesty had asked if Yun Yang wanted to be an official. As long as this child had the desire to be an official and really became one, he could take advantage of someone like you who liked to speak the truth anytime he wanted. Yun Yang had unexpectedly but reasonably rejected the offer. Then, of course, it was time for the drama of the morning assembly. The scene in the morning assembly was swift and decisive, ruthless and decisive. It triggered a long-lost memory among the officials. Back then, His Majesty had done something like this as well, dictating the law and establishing his authority on the spot. However, so many years had passed and His Majesty had never been so unreasonable. Most of the time he had been merciful and strict, fair in rewards and punishments. His methods had become gentler in recent years, rarely spilling blood. Why was he suddenly resorting to such indecent methods today? At this moment, the officials felt like they had returned to the time when the first emperor had ruled the country with his iron fist many years ago. One by one they gave in. This official, pledges? The last person to speak was the Board of Justice's Minister Wu Lai. Minister Wu's face was flushed as he finally managed to speak. This official, pledges, 100 taels. Most of the officials who had pledged were between 100, 200 and 500,000 taels. Basically, no one was lower than this amount. Unexpectedly, the Board of Justice's minister had offered 100 taels. Chapter 162. Many of the officials burst out laughing, thinking that this fellow was slapping His Majesty in the face. 100 taels? How could you say that? That's too degrading. However, the officials who had chuckled were shocked to find themselves being stared at by hundreds of pairs of daggers. Among them was His Majesty the Emperor himself. The president of the Board of Punishments, Wu Lai, was one of the rare officials in the Empire of Yutong's imperial court. Ever since he had become an official, be it when he was a 7th-class county magistrate or a 2nd-class official now, he had never accepted any aid or contact. Even if someone had invited him for a meal or a cup of tea, he had never agreed to it. This person's management of himself and his family was so strict that it was almost unreasonable. His Majesty has conferred me an official position and a salary. Those are the rewards I deserve for serving the imperial court. But other than that, I don't deserve any of the other benefits. As the saying goes, it is hard for one to take advantage of others. I, Wu Lai, cannot disappoint the official position I hold, cannot disappoint His Majesty's trust, and cannot disappoint the people's expectations. Especially now that I'm the director of the Board of Punishments, in charge of the world's criminal laws. I should be strict with myself and reflect on myself. I won't allow any dirty tricks to happen to me, In my eyes there is no mercy beyond the law. The law is the law. When a prince breaks the law, he shall be punished the same as a commoner. After Sir Wu had taken office, the empire of Yutong's cases had indeed decreased in recent years. In addition, the officials had also handled their matters in a more discreet manner. No one dared to act as openly and unscrupulously as before. It could be said that Sir Wu was the one who had turned the tide of the empire of Yutong's laws and regulations. Countless corrupt officials, even if they weren't discovered by him, as long as they saw him, they would tremble and want to confess with a guilty conscience. However, it was also this Sir Wu who had encountered many tragedies. First of all, his beloved wife was in her 30s. When Wu Lai was still an assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, her legs were chopped off due to revenge. Later, it was discovered that not only were her legs crippled, she was also poisoned and paralyzed. She was like a living dead. His son was also imprisoned for many days due to revenge. Although he was lucky enough to survive, not only was his body weak and sickly, he was also poisoned to the point of losing his sight. Even today he still hasn't gotten any better and can only be kept alive with medicine. Furthermore, the medicines used to maintain the lives of his wife and son were all expensive goods. As a result, Lord Wu's life had been extremely difficult for the past few years. A kind-hearted person couldn't stand it any longer and secretly delivered a bag of silver to Lord Wu in the middle of the night, placing it in the courtyard of his house. But as long as he discovered it, he would throw it out without hesitation. Regardless of whether this action was done out of good intentions or a deliberate gift, in this official Wu's heart, he thought, I don't want silver that I shouldn't take. Even if I die of poverty, starvation or suffering, I don't want it. In fact, Yun Yang, Lord Supreme Cloud, had sent people to deliver silver and gold to Lord Wu's house many times, but even when he told him that it was a gift from the 9 Supremes, Lord Wu would still shake his head like a rattledrum and refuse to accept it. Sometimes he would even reject His Majesty's extra reward. I've done my job well and His Majesty rewards me. I want it, it's the reward I deserve and I'm worthy of it. However, I feel that I haven't done my job well. Why should I accept His Majesty's reward? Why are you rewarding me? Isn't the reward and punishment unclear? I won't accept it. Sometimes, His Majesty would even be infuriated by this official's refusal to accept his reward. For such an official to fork out 100 silver taels was already far beyond what he could bear. Well, Minister Wu. His Majesty did not react to the other officials' pledges of 100 or 200 silver taels, but when he saw Wu Lai fork out 100 silver taels, he felt a throbbing pain in his heart. Forget about the silver taels you've pledged to donate. Take the silver taels back and take care of your own life, His Majesty said with a sigh. The pledge this time was done by all the officials. How can this humble official be an exception? I shouldn't be. I still have 173 taels at home. It's enough for this month's living expenses. A smile hung on Wu Lai's steely face. However, you still need to spend on your wife and children. The pledge this time is voluntary. You should do what you can to help others. His Majesty advised gently, take it back. Wu Lai said seriously, Your Majesty, this official knows that the 100 silver taels I've pledged to donate is only a drop in the bucket. It doesn't help the bigger picture and can't be compared to others. However, this official is still a part of the Empire of Yutong. When the Empire is in trouble, this official thinks that it's my duty and responsibility to donate and help. Besides, this money is this official's own money. This official will take it if I want to, and not if I don't want to. His words were adorably blunt. In layman's terms, it was, your father's money, your father can spend it however he likes. What King do you have to do with it? Even if you're the emperor, do you have to care about how my salary is spent? His Majesty almost fell back from this sentence. Old Marshal Chiu and Leng Daoyin laughed at the same time. The two old men guffawed and pointed at Wu Lai. This is King donkey? Wu Lai replied stiffly, you're the donkeys. Your whole family are donkeys. His Majesty's anger turned into laughter and he burst out laughing. Other than Wu Lai, there was no one else who dared to insult the military saber and sword duo so openly. This was something that even His Majesty dared not say. But Wu Lai dared to. He had said it boldly and confidently, boldly, openly, and in high spirits. In his own words, your father has never let down the heavens, never let down the earth, never let down the king, never let down the people. No matter how powerful you are, why should your father be afraid of you? The civil and military officials in the imperial court could not help but snicker as they watched the two old marshals unable to react despite having eaten **tea. These two old rogues had always relied on their unreasonable and brutal methods to dominate the imperial court. Today they could finally see them speechless after being rebuked. How gratifying. This old man is willing to donate another 500,000 silver taels. A white-haired old official stood up. Even if I have to sell everything I have, I'll donate. Just to see these two old men being scolded and humiliated, this old man feels good. I'll donate this money to my heart's content. The current Prime Minister, Du Ruobing, stood up. This old man's wrinkled face was smiling like a blooming chrysanthemum. It was a pity that this old man had been suffering from these two old rogues for his entire life. I thought that I would no longer have the chance to take revenge as I was nearing my grave. Now that someone had helped me vent my anger, how could I not pay for the theater tickets? It's a pity that this old man only has 500,000 silver taels for my coffin. Otherwise it would be worth it even if I had to pay 1,000,000. The old Prime Minister looked relieved. His Majesty lowered his head and covered his forehead with his hand. It could be seen that the old Prime Minister could die without regrets. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said things like this. His Majesty had raked in almost 19 million taels of silver from the donation drive. It was as if a large sum of money had fallen from the sky into his account. His Majesty felt relieved, but at the same time, he was suddenly filled with evil thoughts. He could not get rid of them. There's something wrong with these bastards' families, especially some of them. If they only relied on their salaries, they wouldn't be able to fork out so much money even if they didn't eat or drink for 100 years. Moreover, I've never heard of their families owning any property. Where did they get the money they pledged to donate from? His Majesty pondered. The way he looked at some of them suddenly changed. The officials heaved a sigh of relief when they finally completed the donation drive that His Majesty personally presided over. Then they started to feel the pinch. The next step is for me and all of you to take out some items and send someone to auction them off at the auction outside. I believe we can still get some silver taels. Together with the donations we've collected today, it should be enough. His Majesty was still not satisfied, so he struck again. Cough, cough. All the officials in the imperial court coughed in unison. Your Majesty, you are so greedy at the sight of money? The imperial court meeting ended. Wu Lai walked out of the palace gate and saw old Marshal Qiu Jianhan blocking his way when he lifted his head. What are you doing? Wu Lai looked at Qiu Jianhan warily. Old Marshal Qiu was the leader of the Empire of Yutang's three greatest rogues and had always been infamous. It was one thing for Wu Lai to retort and rebuke the old marshal, but it was not surprising for the old marshal to settle the score and beat someone up. The old marshal scoffed and tossed a bag of silver taels over, saying, "This is the 2,000 silver taels I've lent you. Remember to return it to me when you have the money in the future. I'm lending it to you not for free." He turned and left without another word. Wu Lai hugged the bag of silver taels, his Adam's apple quivered. He felt a surge of warmth in his heart, unable to speak. He could not help but recall last night. Last night, in the middle of the night, Wu Lai washed his wife's body and gave her medicine, but then he heard a painful groan from his son. It was his son who had woken up at night. Because his eyes were blind, he tripped, and because his body was weak, it was difficult for him to maintain his balance, so he fell heavily to the ground. He hurriedly gave his son medicine and helped him to bed. Then, just as he was about to fall asleep, someone suddenly floated in like a cloud. "Sir Wu." "Who is it?" Wu Lai had been calm then. "This lowly one is acquainted with Sir Wu." The person was masked and dressed in black, but his voice was friendly. "Sir Wu should have heard of me. I am the 8th of the 9 Supremes, Supreme Wind." As he spoke, he waved his hand and a gust of wind blew in the enclosed room with its tightly shut windows. The wind swept back and forth, stirring and gentle. It rolled up the things placed in the room and suspended them in the air, then gently put them down. From the beginning to the end, the black-clothed man did not move his hands or feet at all, except for that first wave of his hand. "Is it really Sir Supreme Wind?" Wu Lai was agitated. "You." Chapter 163. Wu Lai was agitated. Supreme Wind smiled. "Sir Wu, I don't think that I'm here to bribe you, do you?" Wu Lai blushed. "How could I? The 9 sirs are benevolent. How can this be considered a bribe? Even if it is a bribe, I will accept it shamelessly." "Ha!" A Supreme Wind chuckled. Without another word, he took out a few pills and fed them to his mistress and young master Wu before cultivating to clear their meridians. The results of the examination made him heave a sigh of relief. The child's blindness was only due to the poison. The bloodline in his eyeballs was not damaged. With the endless divine art and Emmy's help, it was not a big deal. Of course, This kind of poison was impossible for ordinary profound chi cultivators to deal with. The only thing he could do was the endless divine art. It was only after he had treated His Majesty's poison that he realized the miraculous effect of his cultivation method. I'm in so much pain when I add this explanation. So many people can't understand it. Luckily there are enough words. Consider it a complimentary explanation. From then on I will come once every night. Your son's eyes will be able to see again after about 10 days. About half a month later, his eyes will be back to normal and the poison in his body will be completely cleared. As for your wife, I can only help her regain her sanity and her health. However, this broken leg, there's really nothing I can do now. Wu Lai was on the verge of tears. It was the first time in so many years that Wu Lai, who had always been a righteous man, was so emotional. Wu Lai looked at the child blinking shyly and saw his mistress sleeping peacefully for the first time in so many years. Suddenly, tears fell like rain. When he came back to his senses, Supreme Wind had already disappeared without a trace. There was a note on the table, the handwriting was messy. Loyal warrior, loyal minister, heaven protects, the people have eyes. For the country and the people, one's bones will never be destroyed. Take care, sir, Yutong may last for 1,000 years. Recalling the scene last night, he weighed the silver taels tossed over by the old marshal. He knew that he would not accept it, that was why he had said that he would lend it to him and would return it in the future. My Wu Lai's face is valued by so many people. You're carefully protecting me for fear of hurting my pitiful self-esteem. Wu Lai took a deep breath, his eyes filled with steel-like determination. With the silver in his arms, he strode back to his house. With such a large number of loyal officials and warriors, there was no need to worry that Yutong could not prosper. He should do his part to achieve this feat. When Yun Yang went out again, he suddenly realized that the entire Tiantang city seemed to be much cleaner. It was already the 9th of October. There were still 11 days before Tai Zheng's wedding. At present, there were already 2 groups of people from other countries stationed outside the city. Tai Zheng's wedding was a toast to all the militants in the world. This was an important matter for all the soldiers in the world. Of course, this could easily become the fuse that would ignite the entire Tiantang city. Yun Yang decided that it was better to settle the matter of Tai Zheng's marriage before anything else. After all, this cup of wine belonged to all the soldiers in the world, whether they were alive or dead. They were qualified to drink this cup of wine. No matter what, Yun Yang would never allow such an event to be ruined. Stepping on the sparse yellow leaves on the ground, he walked slowly to the meeting place. Young Master Yun, you're here. Young Master Ma stood up eagerly, his face beaming. I only ask you, how much of the wine that was ordered earlier has been settled? Yun Yang asked faintly. Young Master Ma coughed and said, since young Master Yun mentioned it 2 months ago, this young brother did not dare to slack. I've worked through the night to change all the drunken immortal brew in stock to the blood of the hero label, even the jars have been changed. Besides, the 20-odd branches under the Ma family have been producing day and night. As of now, there are already 85,000 jars of this new blood of the hero in stock. How much is a jar worth of silver taels? Yun Yang asked. I know. I've been working around the clock all this time. Young Master Ma smiled warmly. Young Master Yun has instructed, of course the quality has to be the best. The market price of each jar is about 600 silver taels. Each jar weighs 20 caddies. Yun Yang frowned. 600 silver taels? 1 jar? 20 caddies? Doesn't that mean that a caddy of the blood of the hero is worth 30 silver taels? I say, young Master Ma, is your family planning to eat human flesh or drink human blood? Cough, if young Master Yun wants all of this batch of wine, you only need. Young Master Ma gritted his teeth and made up his mind. 200 silver taels per jar. Young Master Yun, according to this price, we've already lost all our manpower. Any less, our family will really. After all, the quantity is too large. Yun Yang snorted softly and did not speak as he held the teacup in his hand. He only calculated in his heart, 80,000 jars, 1,600,000 caddies. 3 cups of wine per caddy for 1,800,000 cups. Not enough, it's far from enough. Yun Yang said, I need at least 100,000 jars of the blood of the hero. Oh my God. Young Master Ma groaned, boss, if we take out another 100,000 jars at this price, our family will be gone. Yun Yang looked at young Master Ma coldly. Meeting Yun Yang's gaze, young Master Ma finally lowered his head dejectedly. All right then, don't be so disheartened. Yun Yang patted young Master Ma's shoulder. Your family will not suffer a loss. I promise. After this transaction is completed, as long as the wine produced by your family isn't priced too ridiculously and the quality is guaranteed, your family will definitely be famous throughout the continent. By then, it'll be hard for you not to be famous even if you want to. Young Master Ma smiled like he was crying. Thank you for your auspicious words. A total of 3,600,000 caddies of wine. Yunyang said, 10 silver taels per caddy, that's a total of 36 million silver taels. Young Master Ma looked at Yunyang with pleading eyes. We're brewing wine, not running a bank. We really don't have that much capital to put in. More than 70% of our family's cash is circulating everywhere. If Yunyang were to ask for a debt, it would be a death sentence. I have 30 million silver taels here. Yunyang took out a stack of banknotes. Young Master Ma breathed a sigh of relief. Although he still had to pay 6 million silver taels, it was already within an acceptable range. I will think of a way to get Marshal Tai Zheng's men to contact you and finalize the wedding wine. Yunyang said leisurely, when the time comes, just give them the wine and ask them for 6 million silver taels. Young Master Ma lifted his head abruptly, his eyes filled with shock. Yunyang turned and said faintly, Are you surprised? That day is a grand occasion for the world's militants. It's also a day that the warriors who died on the battlefield look forward to even in the afterlife. Young Master Ma, I hope that you will do this well. The wine cannot be inferior, the quantity must be sufficient. Also, don't tell anyone about me. Yunyang turned and walked out the door, his purple robe fluttering. I'm counting on you. This is the favor that you all owed me back then. From today onwards, I will no longer use any means to threaten you all. Young Master Ma stood rooted to the spot for a long time while Yunyang was long gone. Don't you worry. Young Master Ma suddenly felt a surge of warmth in his heart. Even if our Ma family has to go bankrupt, we'll make sure this matter is perfect. When Yunyang returned to the residence of Yun, he could feel the eerie aura emanating from his home from afar. He sighed inwardly. What would come would come. It was just as well. It would be good to settle this matter once and for all before Tai Zheng's wedding. He had been walking in a hurry, but after feeling the aura, his pace slowed down. His emotions grew calmer as he got closer to his residence's door. In the backyard of the residence of Yun, a man dressed in black sat quietly in the pavilion under a flowering tree. Lao Mei was sprawled on a stone table, his status unknown. Fang Mafei looked weary, the front of his shirt drenched in blood. His face was pale, his body swaying as he leaned against a flowering tree. Although the man dressed in black was just sitting there, it was as if he had melted into the air. There was no sense of presence at all. He was like a cloud of black smoke that could vanish at any time with a gust of wind. Yunyang walked in leisurely as if he had not noticed the man dressed in black. He first walked to the stone table where Lao Mei was sprawled and took his pulse. Confirming that he had only been knocked out and his meridians had been blocked, he was half relieved. He then walked up to Fang Mafei and checked his pulse as well. His worries were finally put to rest. Before Yunyang returned to the residence, the last thing he wanted to happen was to have casualties on his side, because that would push both sides to a dead end. Now that the two of them were injured but not dead, it meant that there was still room to turn the situation around. Fang Mafei in particular, looked like he was in a bad state, but he had only suffered the punishment when he did not defend himself. His injuries were not severe, they were mostly flesh wounds. The man in black was like a cloud of black fog, but his entire face was shrouded in a layer of black fog. He seemed to be indifferent to Yunyang's series of actions, but Yunyang could feel that this person's aura had locked onto him since he was 100 feet away from his house. Yunyang sat in front of the man dressed in black nonchalantly and said faintly, First Court King Qingguang, one of the 10 kings of the concourse of the underworld? The man in black chuckled similarly. Young Master Yunyang of the Marquis of Heavenly Clouds. You are indeed someone that Ling Xiaozui has taken a liking to. Yunyang smiled. I wonder what brings King Qingguang to my humble abode? I'm only here to see what you're capable of. What right do you have to keep someone from the concourse of the underworld here? First Court King Qingguang chuckled darkly. The atmosphere between both parties grew tenser as if a fight was about to break out at any moment. If it's purely to see my ability? Yunyang said quietly, do you think it's necessary? It is. First Court King Qingguang said, you're only at the 5th peak mystical chi level now. I shall suppress you with my mystical chi 5th peak cultivation base. If you lose, Fang Mafei will die. That's the price of betrayal, and you'll have to pay a corresponding price as well. Even if you have Ling Xiaozui behind you, you'll have to pay the price as well. What if I win? Chapter 164. You win? First Court King Qingguang chuckled in disdain. If you win, I'll let all of you live. Yunyang kept quiet for a bit and said faintly, one more condition. From now on, Fang Mafei has nothing to do with the concourse of the underworld. First Court King Qingguang sneered again. Just based on the fact that you dare to fight a battle you know you can't win, so what if I grant your wish? Yunyang regained his composure as he said softly, please? First Court King Qingguang chuckled softly, but his laughter was like the chilling wind of the 9 serenities hell that had suddenly descended upon the mortal realm. A gust of eerie fog expanded rapidly, enveloping 100 feet of land, including Yunyang and himself within it. The sudden appearance of the fog blocked Yunyang's vision. He could not even see his fingers when he stretched them out, his eyes were clear. Without hesitation, Yunyang closed his eyes. His body moved with the wind and clouds. A gust of eerie wind blew from the thick fog, but Yunyang did not move, allowing the gust to pass through his chest. However, it was not as if Yunyang was completely motionless. He pointed a finger at the same time the gust of eerie wind passed through him. A soft hum of acknowledgement came from the other end. Then a ferocious force came crashing down on Yunyang. Yunyang remained motionless. His opponent's powerful kick that could shatter mountains fell from the top of his head all the way to the ground, but there was no resistance. Yunyang, who had been struck out with his palm when his body was already crippled. The target of the strike was the leg that had shattered his body. First Court King Qingguang snorted in surprise. Suddenly, he turned into a gust of chilly wind and spun rapidly around Yunyang. Countless gusts of chilly wind turned into sharp blades and arrows, attacking Yunyang, who was in the thick fog, from all directions. Yunyang could no longer maintain his unmoving state as he moved as well. His form was like the wind and the clouds, indistinct yet real. His body shifted at will, gathering and dispersing as he pleased. He engaged in a head-on battle with First Court King Qingguang amidst the thick fog. In this battle, the more Qingguang fought, the more he felt that the person in front of him was strange. The body of the person in front of him seemed to be even more insubstantial than him. He couldn't help but feel more depressed as he fought. Sometimes he would even be hit by this brat. Even though there was a huge difference in strength between them, and the brat couldn't hurt him at all, he would still lose face. Qingguang couldn't help but wonder if he could really win this battle. This was the first time King Qingguang's confidence that everything was under his control wavered. A cold light suddenly flashed. An eerie and furious snort was heard. An unprecedentedly majestic force suddenly burst out. Yunyang grunted as he was flung away like a kite with a broken string. The dense and gloomy fog instantly disappeared without a trace. The outcome had been decided. Yunyang, who had been sent flying, stood in the yard 70 feet away. His eyes were as cold as ice and snow. He did not wipe the blood at the corner of his mouth as he said faintly, "You've lost." First Court King Qingguang's face was abruptly covered in a ghastly fog as the air of menace intensified. Does it matter whether you win or lose? You did use the mystical chi of the 5th peak level at the start of the battle. However, you used the mist of the 9 underworlds instead. Yunyang said without a ripple of emotion. Besides, you started using the cultivation base of the 6th peak after 3 moves. As for the last move you used, Yunyang's gaze was filled with mockery. At least the cultivation base of the 8th peak and above. So you've lost this battle. Your Highness King Qingguang? Yunyang smiled faintly. The concourse of the underworld keeps its promise indeed. The thick fog that enveloped First Court King Qingguang froze for a moment. It was obvious that he was enraged, the thick fog almost solidifying. However, for some reason, the intimidating aura suddenly disappeared. You've indeed won this battle. The dark fog on First Court King Qingguang's face dissipated, revealing a square face. It was the image of a middle-aged man in his late 30s. Now, the gaze he used to look at Yunyang was tinged with bewilderment. Yunyang smiled and walked back slowly, not worried that the other party would harm him. He said slowly, "If there's such a day, I'll let you live as well." First Court King Qingguang smiled eerily and asked, "Aren't you afraid of me?" Yunyang smiled. "Why should I be afraid of you? Do you think you can kill me?" Hearing Yunyang's words, First Court King Qingguang thought about it carefully and sighed softly, replying in a low voice, "I can't." He shook his head in bewilderment. "My cultivation base is at least 100 times stronger than your foundation, but I really can't kill you. Your cultivation method is strange and inexplicable. It's amazing." Yunyang smiled faintly. "Actually, what I like to do the most is to make friends. The more friends, the more options. Making enemies is too much of a waste of resources. It's not a wise choice." First Court King Qingguang's gaze flickered like a ball of will-o'-the-wisp. He chuckled strangely and said, "This reputed one's stance on this is the exact opposite of yours. What this reputed one has done in this life is to make enemies. I've never made friends." Yunyang asked, "Aren't the other 9 court lords your friends as well?" First Court King Qingguang kept quiet for a bit and said faintly, "We're not friends." He enunciated each word clearly, "We're brothers." King Qingguang was bewildered by the current situation. Ever since he had uttered those words, this fellow's face had darkened and he had not spoken for a long time. The current situation puzzled him. What was wrong with this fellow? Was he possessed or was he scared stiff? Could he be envious, jealous, or hateful? Feng Mafei, who was standing on the side, looked at Yunyang worriedly. It had to be said that King Qingguang did not intend to cause any trouble when he came this time. Firstly, he had other important matters to attend to this time, so it was not appropriate for him to cause unnecessary trouble. Secondly, and most importantly to the concourse of the underworld, there were those who had died in battle, those who had quit due to being crippled, and those who had committed suicide because they could not complete their missions. However, Feng Mafei was the first one who had made up his mind to leave. King Qingguang was curious about this and sought out Feng Mafei to ask for the reason. Feng Mafei boasted about Yunyang's good points and how he had saved his life, and how he would die for his bosom friend. Only the truth, the reason that could clear King Qingguang's doubts, was not mentioned at all. This piqued His Highness King Qingguang's curiosity towards Yunyang. Coming here and seeing Yunyang, he felt a sense of empathy towards him. There was one more thing that made King Qingguang rather indignant. He bore the title of Hell's Ghost King. However, this fellow in front of him seemed to be unkillable and indestructible. It was as if his entire body did not exist. He was even more of a ghost than he was. Therefore, King Qingguang felt a sense of empathy, as if he had met his own kind. Of course, the main reason that made King Qingguang feel this way was because he realized that he really could not kill this fellow in front of him. His cultivation base was 100 times stronger than his opponent's, yet he could not kill him. King Qingguang felt extremely embarrassed. Most importantly, because he could not be killed, King Qingguang felt that this fellow would definitely be amazing in the future. "Why aren't you saying anything?" King Qingguang asked Yunyang. "I'm thinking of your 9 brothers." Yunyang grinned, a smile that did not carry a hint of a smile. "I'm very envious of you." What? His sullen face and silence earlier was actually because he was envious? Was there any jealousy? Envious? "I've never made friends outside, not a single one," King Qingguang said as if he meant it. "However, if I must make friends outside, I'll put you first." Yunyang smiled. "Really? You think so highly of me?" "Really?" King Qingguang was not joking at all. "Your ranking is even higher than Ling Xiaozui's. If this admiration was true, then it was truly an unparalleled admiration." Yunyang chortled. "Since this is the result of today's battle, this matter shall be written off." Feng Mafei? King Qingguang turned to look at Feng Mafei. Chapter 165. Other than the grassland wolves and the southern border tribes who did not send anyone, the other 4 empires of the continent had sent quite a number of people. Each of the generals had made a similar request. "Can you reserve 100 pots of wine for this general's wedding? This general requests that General Tai do me the honor. Our brothers who are unable to attend this banquet, whether alive or dead, would like to have a cup of this wine that belongs exclusively to militants. Can you reserve 1,000 caddies of wine for Marshal Tai's wedding? The men of our country's military, those who can't attend are waiting for you." Thinking of these words, Tai Jing wanted to curse. "I can't even afford the wine from my own country, why would I reserve it for you? Are you thinking too much?" Of course there was plenty of wine. As long as there were silver taels, forget millions of caddies of wine, even tens of millions of caddies could be bought. The Empire of Yutang alone had more than 10 million taels of wine. How could there be a shortage of wine? As for the wine for Marshal Tai Zheng's wedding banquet, all the taverns were happy to place their orders. However, the problem was that Tai Zheng did not have that much money to pay for the wine. Tai Zheng's wedding banquet had shaken the entire continent's military. The wine used for the wedding banquet could not be too lousy. If it was slightly inferior, it could not be used to entertain the guests. After all, the guests this time were related to the Empire of Yutang. Almost all the high-ranking military generals of the empires were here. How could they explain themselves if they did not bring out good wine? If they were to use the inferior wine that could be bought with a tael of silver, would they have to drink all the generals of the opposing countries to death here? Drinking too much would really cause trouble. Even the cheapest wine that could be served at the wedding banquet would cost 10 silver taels a caddy. Even if they were to use this kind of wine that cost 10 silver taels a caddy, the entire wedding banquet would need at least 2 million caddies of it. That would be 20 million silver taels. How could Tai Jing have so much silver taels? Even if Tai Jing sold all his bone marrow, he would not be able to gather it. Because of this matter, General Tai had been frowning and sighing every day during this period of time. His Majesty had just started a donation drive and emptied everyone's pockets. He could not even borrow money from anyone. He did not regret making this decision back then, he was just fretting. Silver taels. Silver taels. Sometimes Tai Jing was so worried that he could not sleep at night, thinking, should I send 20,000 men in 10 directions to suppress the bandits? That could also be regarded as a way to make money, a way to solve the problem, Commander-in-Chief. The leader of the guard said, someone from the Ma family is here to see you? Oh. Tai Jing asked impatiently, which Ma family? It's the Ma family, the Empire of Yutong's top tavern. The leader of the Janissary said excitedly, their young master Ma Qinglu is here. Call him in. Tai Jing was puzzled. The Ma family's wine had always been high-end. The lowest quality wine among all the wines seemed to cost 7 to 8 silver taels a caddy. It was obvious that it did not match the wine he was going to use at his wedding. Why had they come to him? Young Master Ma's first sentence when he arrived was enough to make Tai Jing overjoyed. I've long heard of Marshal Tai's grand wedding. Coincidentally, we have a batch of wine that has been stored for a long time. We're willing to sell it to Marshal at the lowest price. Please do us the honor, Marshal. How much wine? Tai Jing's interest was piqued. 4 million caddies. Ma Qinglu said, a pot is 20 caddies, a total of 200,000 pots. So much? Tai Jing was shocked. Then he thought that this amount of wine would be enough to handle the wedding. However, what about the price? As he thought about it, Tai Jing asked weakly, how much for a caddy? He thought to himself, since the wine produced by the Ma family of golden spears and iron horses has been stored for a long time, it must be a high-end premium wine. Even if it's sold at a low price, it should be at least 15 to 20 silver taels. If it's 20 silver taels, it's 80 million silver taels. If this fellow really says something similar, your father will beat him out. Look at me, do I look like someone who has 80 million silver taels? Are you trying to fool your father? Your father only has 20 million now, what's there to worry about? How about 6 million silver taels for this humble shop's 4 million caddies of wine? When young Master Ma Qinglu said this, his heart was filled with emotion. Yin Yang. My great young Master Yun, why are you doing this? A whole 30 million silver taels had been tossed out without batting an eyelid. You didn't even let others know. Ma Qinglu did not know that it was not only the 30 million silver taels that were used to buy the wine, even the money that was to be paid for Tai Jing's wedding and the wine had come from Yin Yang. After His Majesty's incident, Tiantang City's money supply was unprecedentedly tight. It was rare for anyone to make a large transaction. Tai Jing's initial plan to sell his 2 manors and years of rewards in exchange for money could not be formed. No one would buy it even if it was sold at a discount. If not, why would Yin Yang need to go through so much trouble? Can't afford what? Just as Tai Jing uttered the word subconsciously, his eyes widened. How much did you say? He could hardly believe his ears. 6 million silver taels? 4 million caddies? 5 silver taels for a caddy? So cheap. Could it be inferior wine? Tai Jing looked at Ma Qinglu suspiciously. This was probably the only explanation. Otherwise, how could it be so cheap? It must be inferior wine or else it wouldn't have been stored for so long. To reassure Marshal, I've brought 100 pots of wine today. Ma Qinglu said, it's just outside, Marshal can have a taste. Pots of wine were brought in. However, Tai Jing fell in love with the wine jar at first glance. The green wine jar was not the usual oval shape. Instead, it was long and had distinct edges and corners. A large piece of red cloth sealed the mouth of the pot. It was as red as blood. On the red cloth were 3 large black words. Blood of the hero. Just this pot, this piece of red cloth, and these 3 words made Tai Jing's eyes redden. Even if this wine was slightly inferior, he would still want it. On the back of the pot, the same piece of red cloth was written with small words. Loyal heart and blood to protect the country, loyal soul to build the fortress. Tai Jing felt like he was struck by lightning, stunned as tears flowed down his cheeks. When the wine was poured out, it was as red as blood, the aroma of the wine filling the air. Tai Jing's hands were shaking as he picked up a bowl and drained it in one gulp, feeling a burning heat rush into his throat. Immediately after, a raging fire started burning in his stomach. Great wine. Truly great wine. Tai Jing's words were accompanied by his tears. My brothers will definitely be satisfied. He asked in a trembling voice, are all the wines of this standard? Yes. Ma Qinglu said loudly, if there's a pot of inferior quality, this humble house will not charge a single cent for all the wine. Tai Jing sucked in a deep breath and grabbed Ma Qinglu's hand, overwhelmed with gratitude. Thank you. Which man in the military did not like wine? It was the same for Tai Jing. How could he not feel that the quality of the wine was not inferior at all? It was definitely of the highest quality. 5 silver taels for a caddy, it was no different from giving it away for free. With such a price, young Master Ma's family would have to suffer a great loss. Ma Qinglu hesitated and said, Marshal need not take it to heart. The Ma family did not suffer a great loss in this transaction. We were entrusted by someone. Marshal should be thanking us, not us. He finally said it out loud. Tai Jing was shocked. Oh, please forgive me for not being able to tell you. Ma Qinglu said, that person has reminded me time and time again not to reveal it. Marshal, please do not make things difficult for me. I wish Marshal a happy wedding. Ma Qinglu took 2 steps back and bid farewell with a salute. I also hope that the brothers in the military can drink to their heart's content. This humble one shall take his leave. Wait. Tai Jing called out to him, I'll bring the banknotes, you can take them away. Tai Jing took out the banknotes and insisted on paying an additional 2 million taels. Ma Qinglu refused resolutely and went home with the 6 million taels banknotes. In the afternoon of the same day, men from the military were dispatched to coordinate with the Ma family's business to send carts of fine wine into Tai Jing's residence. 2 large warehouses that had been emptied earlier were filled in the time it took to make a cup of tea. Then, in the courtyard, a group of men from the military were sweating profusely, stacked neatly like a mountain. The entire courtyard was filled, but only a third of it was filled. A piece of land was flattened outside the courtyard, surrounding the military camp and storing the wine in the center. When everything was done, 1,000 soldiers were drenched in sweat. Open a few pots quickly. Brothers, you've worked hard. Let us drink first and relax. Tai Jing was about to move the wine as he spoke. Then 2 janissaries pounced on him and hugged him tightly. Marshal, no need, no need, no need. Tai Jing turned back and looked at the soldiers whose faces were streaked with sweat. Aren't all of you tired? What's wrong with treating all of you to this general's wedding wine? Aren't you going to give this general some face? No, no, no. One of the janissaries gulped, smiling honestly. There's really no need. This isn't just Marshal's wedding wine, it's also the wedding wine of all our brothers who have been through life and death, the wedding wine of all our brothers who are alive and dead. If it was any other time and any other wine it would be fine. But this wine, if we don't drink it on that day, we will feel guilty. We completely understand Marshal's feelings, but this time we truly appreciate it. The leader of the janissaries said seriously, after Marshal's wedding, if there's still wine left, we can drink it. If we drink a few pots today and there are a few pots missing on that day, even if the brothers die immediately, we will be too ashamed to show our faces. How can we face our fallen brothers in the underworld? Looking at the sincere faces, Tai Jing felt his throat suddenly choking. All right, good brothers. Tai Jing stumbled into the room and suddenly guffawed, howling into the sky. Brothers, do you see this wine? Do you see it? This is my wedding wine, our wine. Your wine. His voice was completely hoarse when he uttered the last few words. Chapter 166. 8,000 men are not enough. The captain of the janissaries looked serious. Send another 2,000 men here. From today onwards this wine is our life. Even if all 3,000 of our brothers die in battle, not a single drop of this wine can be missing. We brothers are not the only ones here. Underground, there are millions of loyal souls of our brothers waiting for it. The captain of the janissaries' eyes were rimmed red. We wait for that day to raise our goblets with all our brothers alive and dead. As long as I think of that day, that moment, as long as I can experience that day, that moment, that goblet of wine, I will have no regrets in this life. On the 11th of the 10th month, Tiantang City began to impose a curfew. Water was poured on the streets and yellow soil was used to pad the roads. The number of patrols on the streets had tripled. All the shops in Tiantang City, regardless of their origins or background, received the notice. Within a month, no one was allowed to cause any trouble. Violators would be shut down without question and would not be allowed to open again within a month. Everything else would be dealt with a month later. On the 12th of the 10th month, some of the larger shops and important buildings had begun to be cleaned. They were decorated with red ribbons and the atmosphere was joyous. On the 13th of the 10th month, 3 of the armies stationed outside the city had arrived. The military representatives of the other countries that were scheduled to come were also gradually approaching in an endless stream. On the 15th of the 10th month, the empire of Dongxian, Marshal Han Sanhe, who was hailed as the god of war, had arrived with his army. The entire Tiantang city was in an uproar. However, it was not a joyous occasion but a seething hatred. They wanted nothing more than to cut him into 1,000 pieces and kill him as soon as possible. Dongxian and Yutong had just finished their war not too long ago. The empire of Yutong, the victorious party, had still paid the price of hundreds of thousands of casualties. The blood of the sacrificed warriors had yet to dry, their corpses had yet to turn cold, and their souls had yet to leave. Han Sanhe had arrived in Tiantang City with such a light entourage, how could he not stir up a commotion? Undercurrents were surging and the repercussions were unprecedented. A letter of credence of peace, those who come are guests. A grand event for the military, we shall not stop until we are drunk. Unique since time immemorial, this is the only one. It will be passed down through the ages, a good name will last forever. Do not shame the hero, do not let the soul of the hero feel guilty. The short leaflets were delivered by tens of thousands of soldiers from door to door. 3 soldiers formed teams. One knocked on the door while another stepped forward to salute, presenting the leaflets with both hands. There was another one who was carrying a thick stack of leaflets. Please understand. This is the wish of countless brothers. Thank you for fulfilling it. He gave one to every family, every inn, and every shop. As long as there were people, Yutong soldiers would send the same leaflet. Other than being an enemy, the visitor was also a militant, a warrior who was as brave as Yutong's warriors. His purpose of coming here was to celebrate Tai Zheng's wedding, who was also a militant, and he had come on behalf of countless Dongxian warriors. Even though both parties had different standpoints, they should at least show due respect and reverence at this moment. Whatever grudge there was, he could settle it on the battlefield, but he could not act recklessly now. The hidden undercurrent instantly calmed down. Some of the elderly who had not yet been delivered their leaflets had opened their doors early in the morning, prepared some food and tea and placed them at the door. Seeing the soldier handing out leaflets walking over, he tried his best to persuade him to stay. Child, work hard and fight well. Take care. We understand all of you. Child, kill more when you go to the battlefield in the future. My second son has just died at the Fortress of Resilience a few days ago. Seeing all of you makes me feel like I've come home again. You must eat, drink, and rest for a while before you leave. You've worked hard. An old lady gripped the soldier's hand tightly, gently caressing the scar on the soldier's face. Her face was filled with pity. Child, you've suffered. Every soldier who went to distribute the leaflets came back with bloated stomachs and red-rimmed eyes. It was quiet in the city. The top of the city was quiet. Outside the city it was quiet as well. Half of the continent's generals had gathered here, their banners fluttering in the wind. Han Sanhe walked out of his tent slowly and came to a slightly higher mound, looking at Tiantang City from afar. The chilly autumn wind blew against his face, almost causing him to lose his footing. In spite of this, Han Sanhe stood quietly, looking at the flags above Tiantang City and the Yutong soldiers who were exceptionally energetic today. He stared at them for a long time without moving. Marshal. Zhang Gu walked forward, holding a cloak in his hand. Han Sanhe waved his hand to stop him. He only stared at the cloak and murmured, Yutong's destiny has yet to decline. Zhang Gu and the other 2 men stood behind Han Sanhe, watching with widened eyes. Marshal, where did you see that from? How come we didn't see anything? Do you know? Han Sanhe said softly, there are so many countries in the continent. There are even countries that are eyeing us now, but this old man has never taken them to heart. It was only when we were fighting Yutong that this old man had to act personally, even when I knew it was a trap. Why was that? Did you not know about it beforehand and did not discuss it afterwards? The 3 men were stunned. Thinking about it, it seemed like it had been like this all these years. Han Sanhe would only act personally when the empire of Yutong was at war. As for the other countries who had only sent one of the 3 of them or some other generals, he had never cared about it. In the past, they had thought that the marshal thought too highly of himself and did not want to act personally. Now it seemed like there was another reason. May I ask what is the reason, Marshal? Zhang Gu asked, scratching his head in confusion. Although the ranking of the continent's famous generals is only a gimmick to attract attention, there are many things within that are worth pondering. Han Sanha squinted against the autumn wind and said faintly, "Have you noticed that the Empire of Yutong occupies 17 of the top 50 famous generals in the continent? This ratio is higher than any of our countries. As for the top 10 famous generals, Yutong's ratio is even more terrifying. They occupy 3 of the spots." Han Sanha said faintly, "Perhaps all of you don't know this, but the Empire of Yutong once occupied 7 of the top 10 spots of the continent's famous generals." 7? Mu Wuyun and Gao Han, who were standing aside, were shocked. Zhang Gu was shocked as he asked, "Is it because of the Shangguan family of generals?" "That's right. Out of the 7 famous generals of Yutong, 5 of them belonged to the Shangguan family of generals. The other 2 were Yutong's old marshals. They've passed away many years ago, but the glory of Yutong's military back then was truly awe-inspiring. Even when this old man thinks about it now, I'm still shocked and terrified. If it weren't for the collusion between the 3 countries' allied army and the 36 ambushes that killed all of Yutong's Shangguan family of generals, the world would have long been Yutong's territory." Han Sanha's voice was heavy. After that battle, Yutong could no longer expand, but the number of famous generals and marshals was endless. No matter what era it was, Yutong's famous generals were always more than the other countries, and they were also much stronger. "Do all of you know why this is so?" Han Sanha's voice grew heavier. "Why is this so?" Gao Han was rather indignant. "Is Yutong's military talent so high? Are there only so many talents?" "Not really." Han Sanha said faintly, "Yutong's strength comes more from its geography. Since the Empire of Yutong was founded, its capital has been located in Tiantang City. The entire Empire of Yutong's territory is the center of half the continent. The Empire of Yutong's greatest strength is because it is attacked from all sides." Han Sanha heaved a deep sigh. "The Empire of Yutong's generals are at war almost every year. Any one of them is a general who is used to the battlefield, a general who has been through hundreds of battles. To be said to be a general who has been through hundreds of battles, in the eyes of Dongshin and Deyuan, Tianxi, Ziyou, and the other 4 empires, other than a handful of generals, even if the others have been praised as having been through hundreds of battles, it's actually just a glorification. Other than the Empire of Yutong's generals, there's hardly any other country's general who dares to say that they've been through hundreds of battles. In fact, the number of generals who have actually fought in so many battles is probably less than 30 across the entire continent. However, the Empire of Yutong's generals have been through hundreds of battles. Hundreds of them. They're not just fighting with their lives, they're fighting with their entire lives. Do you understand the difference? The wars we've faced are mostly against the other forces, but the Empire of Yutong's soldiers have fought the east, then the south, then the west, then the north, and even the northeast, southwest, and so on. Whether they come to attack us or not, we'll still attack them. This is a never-ending cycle, and neither side has a choice. After such a cycle, how can someone who has survived hundreds of battles not be terrifying? Yet, any country in the continent can't bypass Yutong if they want to expand their territory. Han Sanha sighed tiredly after speaking so much. So, Yutong's strength is acknowledged by the world. We have to admit it, we have to admit it. I'm old. Even if I manage to hold on, I can't fight for more than a few years. But you must remember, when you meet the Empire of Yutong's generals on the battlefield in the future, no matter who they are, famous or not, you must never let your guard down. If Yutong survives, it will be the Empire of Yutong that can unite the world in the future. Unless Yutong falls first, only then will the other countries have the chance to fight for supremacy in this chaotic world. Actually, isn't this the main reason why the 4 empires rarely fight each other but we've all sent troops to Yutong? Han Sanha said softly, "Yutong is the world's enemy. The world fears it. Look at the soldiers on top of the city wall now." Han Sanha lifted his gaze. Chapter 167. On top of the city wall, Yutong's soldiers were clad in bright armor, their bodies tall and straight. Even the sabers and swords in their hands seemed to be glowing under the sunlight. They paced back and forth, disciplined and high-spirited. Do you see that? It's not a request from the general or a high-pressure imperial edict. The expressions on their faces are from the bottom of their hearts. They're using this method to demonstrate their might to us. The expression on each of their faces is the crystallization of pride and glory. Let me tell you, these soldiers who are proud to be born in such a country and to be able to protect such a country are the strongest soldiers. A country and people that can nurture such soldiers is the greatest nation and people. When Yutong soldiers fight, the slogan they shout the most is to protect the country. It's because they're constantly being beaten. That's why they shout to protect. As for the soldiers of other countries, even the Empire of Dongxian, many of them are thinking of fighting a war as soon as possible, gaining military merit, getting promoted and getting rich. Han Sanha's voice was tinged with bleakness. This is different. It's fundamentally different. When the slogan of protecting the country is shouted too many times, it will naturally become the spiritual belief of the nation's soldiers. Once such a belief is formed, Han Sanha uttered word by word solemnly, it's the scariest thing in this world. It's indestructible. Yutang repels Dongxian to the east, fights Qianxi to the north, Zhou to the west, Dayuan to the south. Even when it's surrounded by enemies, it's still safe and sound. Han Sanha chuckled bitterly. If Yutang's entire nation's strength was only enough to face any one of the four empires, I'm afraid this country would have long become a part of Yutang's territory. I've only known today that Yutang is actually so terrifying. The three generals sucked in a cold breath. I've never talked about Yutang's history and foundation before this because I'm afraid of wearing down your morale and confidence. It's a pity that this old man is old. If I don't take this opportunity to tell you all about these things today, you'll lose everything if you're not careful when you go up against Yutang's valiant generals in the future. Even if it's an ordinary Yutang cavalryman who has survived hundreds of battles, he can be a captain who commands 500 cavalrymen when he goes to our country. He'll perform exceptionally well too. And this is only a comparison between individual soldiers. My only hope now is to breach the fortress of resilience in my remaining years and incorporate the 7,000 miles of fertile land east of Yutang into Dongxuan's territory. That will be enough. Han Sanha said solemnly, once Yutang loses that huge territory, its power will decrease by a third. By then all the countries will be at ease, especially Dongxian. We can unify the world if we advance and live in peace if we retreat. Marshall's wish will definitely come true. Didn't we almost accomplish this last time? Mu Wuyun said. It's a pity that I won't have such an opportunity again. Han Sanha uttered the word quietly and continued, what I'm most worried about now is the empire of Yutang's emperor, Yupeiza. If Tai Zheng had organized such a wedding in any other country other than the empire of Yutang, he would have been beheaded long ago. However, in Yutang, it could be held successfully. His Majesty the Emperor had even personally issued a letter of credence for peace to promote this grand event for the militants. How magnanimous. There's not even the slightest bit of suspicion between the Emperor and his subjects. What more can I ask for when I serve you like this? Han Sanha sighed wistfully. It was not only Han Sanha, the generals of the other countries were quietly observing Tiantang City as well. There was not the slightest hint of hostility in Tiantang City, it only stood quietly in the distance. The city gates were wide open and there were countless people entering and exiting the city. Peace and serenity filled their eyes. However, it was this peace and harmony that caused the pupils of these battle-hardened generals to contract. The passers-by who came and went looked at them at their own military base, the hatred in their gazes, the fists that were clenched tightly, also the silhouettes of them leaving with their heads held high without doing anything. Those were just ordinary citizens. The letter of credence for peace is a grand event for the militants. During this period of time, we won't lay a hand on you. We won't make a move until all of you leave Yutang safely. Because we can't let our warriors lose face, we can't let our loyal souls be shamed. Life and death, victory and defeat are all decided on the battlefield. This is our pride. These words were not spoken by Yutang's people, but all the generals who had come had heard them clearly. They saw it too. Half in awe and half in fear. The 16th of October. 3,000 troops began to hold a large-scale ceremony to sweep the graves. A red cloth was hung on the door of each family that had injured soldiers or soldiers who had died in the war. A line of words was written on the red cloth. Emerald blood loyal heart protects home and country, iron bones loyal soul builds impregnable fortress. Yun Yang had put aside all other matters, whether he had clues or not, to prepare for this event with all his might. He had learned to be more obedient now. There were too many experts in this world. Not to mention Ling Xiaozue, Supreme Lord Springfrost, and the rest who were abnormally powerful. Just the concourse of the underworld's King Qingguang alone was not only powerful, he could also make Yun Yang envious. Who knew if he would attract the attention of other experts if he acted rashly? Yun Yang turned into a gust of wind and returned to the city, going to the Shangguan family of generals. During this period of time, Yun Yang would visit the 6 children whenever he had the time. Yun Yang was genuinely surprised by the Shangguan children's determination and tenacity, and was even more impressed. Once they obtained the high-tier martial art manuals, the 6 children eagerly threw themselves into training. In spite of this, the usual physical training did not stop, continuing at the original pace. Some of them even showed signs of increasing the intensity of their training. With the nourishment of the superior cultivation method, complemented by the high-intensity physical training, the 6 children's growth was at an unimaginably fast rate. The result, or rather the current situation, made Yun Yang fall into deep thought. After returning home, he had set up a training base in his residence of Yun and began to torture himself with all his might. Yun Yang's plan was to torture himself for 7 days and see how it worked. He wanted to confirm the success of such extreme training, whether it was good or bad, and how much benefit it could bring if it was good. Yun Yang's torture was truly playing with his life. At the beginning of each training session, he would first execute 3 forms of Destiny's Merciless Saber. Without any super recovery, the 3 forms of Merciless Saber drained all the mystical qi in his body. Then he would undergo extreme training like the Shangguan 6 children, tormenting his physical strength until there was nothing left. In the end, Yun Yang, who had been training intensely, was completely relying on his willpower. It was only until he could no longer hold on and was close to passing out, lying on the ground like a dead dog, drenched in sweat. Only then did he activate his mystical qi and cultivate the endless divine art to recover himself. It had only been a day, but Yun Yang could clearly feel the immense benefits of such training. His mystical qi recovered. From the initial strands of condensation, it turned into a monstrous wave that surged upwards with the force of an avalanche. When he had fully recovered, Yun Yang actually felt that the thickness of his inner qi had increased a notch out of nowhere. After his body had recovered from the extreme fatigue, there was a subtle feeling of his muscles and bones being strengthened. What was more obvious was his willpower and deific consciousness. There was no need to talk about his willpower, but as for his deific consciousness. Amidst Emmy's delighted reaction, Yun Yang realized that the space where Emmy was hiding had actually expanded a little. Was it a surprise? Was it a surprise? Haha. But the recommendation votes and monthly votes are so pitiful. Please recommend, please vote. If today's monthly votes are okay, I'll bring my laptop to the meeting tomorrow. Chapter 168. Although it was just a little bit, it was just the result of a day's training. Furthermore, judging from Emmy's surprised reaction, this was definitely a great thing that was hard to come by. Helping others is helping myself. This is probably another form of reciprocation for helping others as well as oneself. Yun Yang could not help but feel emotional. It was because he had planted the seed of wanting to help this family of martyrs back then that he could comprehend this principle from them now. People often said that fated chances were hard to find, but they did not know that fated chances were often just around the corner, born and extinguished with a single thought. With the kind heart he had back then, there would only be such good results today. To be fair, the results he had obtained today were substantial, but the greater benefit was the realization. The realization that he had seen through what might very well be a misunderstanding of the world's martial artists. Due to fate and coincidence, it was accidentally broken by him. Focusing solely on physical training is as bad as falling short. If the body can't handle it, it'll cripple the person. However, focusing solely on the cultivation of mystical qi isn't necessarily a bad move. Even if there's success, the path will become narrower and more difficult. Cultivation experts often say that the physical body is a cultivator's treasured raft to transcend the world. The true meaning lies within. Only when the physical body's sturdiness is guaranteed and it can bear the growing mystical qi can it be considered to be truly complete. Thinking of this, Yun Yang could not help recalling what Ling Xiaozui had said. The human body is the treasured raft to transcend the world, but most people waste what God has bestowed upon them. When Yun Yang recalled this, he was silent for a long time, deep in thought. In the past, Yun Yang and Supreme Cloud had been unafraid of any tangible attack in the world, relying on the intangible form of his cloud manifestation and its unpredictability. He had habitually used himself as bait, using himself to lure the enemy and defeat the enemy. He did not know that such a method had fallen into a disadvantageous position. If one was truly strong, would it not be better to face the enemy head-on and kill them? If the other party was truly strong to a certain extent, what could one do even if one were to transform into a million forms? Since then, he had paid more attention to the physical training of his body. The reason he had been keeping an eye on the Shangguan family of generals these days was also because the winds in Tiantang City had been a little off these days. No one knew exactly when it had started, but it seemed like it had started from the moment there were troops from other countries stationed outside the city. Then, a strange wave of voices rose within Tiantang City, growing stronger and stronger until it was unstoppable. The streets and alleys were filled with discussions about the past of the Shangguan family of generals. Back then, the three marshals of the Shangguan family of generals fought against the outside world. They were domineering, but they did not expect the Minister of War, Zhuo Wenlong, to be held hostage by the enemy nation. He kept divulging the military's movements and passed fake imperial edicts. In the end, the three marshals were ambushed by the armies of 4 enemy nations and died tragically on Changqing Road. This was a past that had long been sealed in the coffin. The culprit, Zhuo Wenlong, had long been executed, his entire family annihilated. Recently, however, there was a rumor that Zhuo Wenlong's descendants had escaped death and carried Zhuo Wenlong's will. The past was not as simple as it looked. The truth was that the three marshals had intended to rebel and usurp the throne, to change the dynasty. Zhuo Wenlong, as the Minister of War, had seen through their conspiracy. For the sake of the nation and its people, he could not bear to see Yutang being destroyed and the people plundered. That was why he had decided to go to the extreme and eliminate the traitors for the nation. Although he had to collude with the enemy and set up a formation to exterminate the traitors, his intention was benevolent and the result was benevolent. However, the process of the incident was complicated. The three marshals were executed before their traces of rebellion were leaked, causing the entire empire of Yutang to be kept in the dark. Zhuo Wenlong was filled with passion and served the nation and its people, but his entire family was executed and he died a wrongful death. Now they wanted to reverse Zhuo Wenlong's verdict. The slogan was, "We all owe justice to our national hero, Zhuo Wenlong." At first, this unhealthy trend was only a rumor among the people. However, in less than a day it quickly spread to the circle of scholars. Then all kinds of rumors and arguments began to ferment without warning. In between, there were countless scholars who analyzed the situation of the year by quoting from the classics and finally came to a conclusion. The three marshals of the Shangguan family of generals controlled 75% of the empire's military force that year. Their contributions were undoubtedly high enough to awe the emperor. This was the absolute truth. No one could deny it. The Shangguan family of generals had a high prestige. Each of them had countless men of sacrifice under their command. To these people, their orders were the imperial edicts. The real imperial edicts were nothing to them. The scholars pointed out even more sharply that as the marshal of an army, the soldiers he led should be loyal to the empire and his majesty, but they should never, and even more so, should not be loyal to the marshal alone. From this point of view, the crimes of the three marshals could be discussed, but their intentions were already punishable by death. Many of Zhuo Wenlong's past deeds were dug up as well, how he had benefited the people, how he had been loyal and courageous, how he had admonished the emperor bluntly, how he had been outspoken, as Zhuo Wenlong's letters to his friends, Zhuo Wenlong's memorials, Zhuo Wenlong's calligraphy, Zhuo Wenlong's poems. There was a line in the poem that said, "Cast away the false reputation and give up this body, so that the wicked will not rule the world." The loyalty in it could be seen by the heaven and earth. All in all, the empire of Yutang had been cursing this treacherous official for more than 100 years, but in a blink of an eye, he had become a famous official who had died a wrongful death. There was reason and evidence, there were witnesses. The uproar grew stronger and more serious by the day. Countless scholars began to walk the streets, calling for justice for the hero and to reverse Zhuo Wenlong's verdict. They wanted to bring the deceiving Shangguan family of generals down to the dust and condemn them anew. As the generals of the various countries continued to arrive and set up camp outside the city, the commotion in the city became more and more intense. Countless scholars cited classics to denounce them, leaving those who retorted speechless. Many people who did not know the truth were incited and began to target the Shangguan family of generals. Especially in the last few days, the Shangguan residents began to suffer more and more attacks. Rotten eggs, rotten vegetables, leaves and half of bricks were thrown into the residence. Every day they piled up like a mountain. The main door was also slashed and all kinds of filth were thrown into the residence. The stench was overwhelming. Even then, the people's resentment did not subside. Instead, it grew stronger with each passing day. Now the Shangguan family dared not step out of the house. Once they did, they would be attacked. While Yunyang felt angry and sad about the absurd situation, he could not help but be greatly puzzled. Who was it that was stirring up trouble? On the surface, this phenomenon had only occurred after the arrival of the generals from various countries. Their hatred towards the Shangguan family had never been concealed, as if they wanted nothing more than to annihilate them. However, Yunyang knew that things were not so simple. Investigate. Yunyang's order was given and the Nine Heavens dictum responded. Then Yunyang snuck into the Shangguan residence under the cover of the night. On the field, the 6 children were still practicing as usual. Although each child was still gritting their teeth with a determined look on their faces, Yunyang could see the grievance that came from the depths of their hearts. Putting himself in their shoes, Yunyang could empathize with the 6 children's current state of mind. If the 9 Supreme Lords, whom Yutong's people worshipped like deities, were to be denounced as filthy in the future, slandering those who served the country and its people wholeheartedly as malevolent beings, how could they bear it? The Shangguan family of generals present day might be the future of another unparalleled hero. What grievance? Shangguan Lingxiu paced back and forth with her arms behind her back, her voice cold. Is it wrong to hit all of you? The truth is the truth. All of us from the Shangguan family are dead, we've all died in the battlefield. Isn't this the best proof? Each and every one of you actually dared to ask me if the rumors outside were true. Even if I kill all of you unfilial descendants, it's all you deserve. The 6 children did not utter a word, continuing their training without pause. If the Shangguan family of generals had the intention to rebel back then, Yutong would have changed its master a long time ago. Shangguan Lingxiu's voice was as cold as ice. Not only great-grandfather's generation, even grandfather's generation, my father's generation, and your father's generation, the Shangguan family of generals of that generation had the ability to do so. However, the Shangguan family of generals' ancestral teachings were to protect Yutong, to protect the country, and to be loyal. The Shangguan family of generals' loyalty is witnessed by the heavens and the earth. How can it be erased by a few slanderous slander? Justice is in the hearts of the people. Right and wrong are not to be spouted nonsense. All of you continue your training. Don't let your thoughts run wild. Shangguan Lingxiu's expression was steely. Auntie, since our family is so loyal, why isn't anyone speaking up for us now? The oldest child was already 9 years old. He asked angrily with widened eyes, could it be that everyone who knows about this case is dead? Even Zhuo Wenlong's evil is still alive, and the other officials of the same era have no descendants? Is no one willing to speak up for justice? Isn't the right and wrong being manipulated by nonsense now? Shangguan Lingxiu said loudly, isn't this something you should be worrying about? Marshal Tai's wedding is right before our eyes. The military bosses are all busy with this. Our family's trivial matter is inconsequential. When the old sirs are done with their work, they will naturally deal with it. Justice is in the hearts of the people. Don't you understand what I'm saying? The child said stubbornly, what justice is there? Aren't the ancestors of the people who are attacking our family also protected by the blood of the Shangguan family? Why do these people still believe such rumors even though someone from our family has died and our family members are already so miserable to such an extent? Are we only protecting the people who attacked us with our blood and sacrifice? Is our family's sacrifice really worth it? Slap. Shangguan Lingxiu slapped her nephew's face, her body trembling as tears welled up in her eyes. Do you know what you're talking about? The achievements of our ancestors will be passed down in history. The Shangguan family of generals was built step by step like this. What does it have to do with you whether others understand it or not? She said loudly, what does the Shangguan family of generals' family motto say? Recite it all together. Born for the battlefield, live for the war, die for the country, sacrifice for the people. The 6 children recited it aloud with tears in their eyes. Does the family motto mention the need for understanding, comfort, protection, and repayment? Shangguan Lingxiu asked sternly. No. The 6 children puffed up their chests and raised their heads. What did our ancestors say about life and death? Shangguan Lingxiu's voice grew more intense. Only die for the country. There's no need to die in battle. It's good that you know. Shangguan Lingxiu said loudly, this is the Shangguan family of generals. Do you remember it? This is the way of the world. Is this how the world works? Shangguan Lingxiu shuddered, her eyes spitting fire. Could it be that the Shangguan family of generals' generations of sacrifices are exchanged for the word treacherous? Don't tell me that the price we have to pay is to be insulted by the world. Yunyang said faintly, your emotions are too agitated now. Even if you need to vent, you have to pay attention to the method. He heaved a sigh of relief and said, Sister Lingxiu, do you know what the most common problem in this world is? What is it? Shangguan Lingxiu asked. It's forgetfulness. Yun Yang said, whether it's good or bad, wise or foolish, the most common problem is forgetfulness. Forgetting what has happened. Forgetting the heroes who once existed. Forgetting the favors they've received. Forgetting everything in this world. No one from the Shangguan family of generals has gone to the battlefield in recent years. Even though you women and children are doing your best, hoping that these 6 children can put on their armor as soon as possible and embark on the journey again, the world doesn't know about it. Therefore, many people have begun to forget the Shangguan family of generals' past sacrifices. The person who set this up has made use of this common problem of human forgetfulness to stir up trouble. However, their method this time is brilliant. Yun Yang said, they started from the streets and then spread to the scholars. Then, it spread like a wildfire, but no one has ever made the officials say anything. No matter how capable we are, we can't kill when faced with the anger of the common people, no matter how angry and wronged we are. That's why we're aggrieved. We can only be aggrieved. Shangguan Lingxiu gritted her teeth and said, someone must be behind this. Our family has thought of this long ago, but what chills us the most is the reaction of the Empire of Yutong's people. They don't distinguish right from wrong, they forget all of history. As long as someone provokes them, they'll swarm in. Shangguan Lingxiu bit her lip, her eyes rimmed with tears. Looking at a prosperous country, everyone is willing to die for this country, for these people, one after another. They leave in laughter, only to return as corpses, leaving only orphans and widows, yet they have to endure such humiliation. Why? Shangguan Lingxiu turned to look into Yun Yang's eyes. There was a burning flame in her teary gaze. Yun Yang, tell me, why is this so? Yun Yang was speechless. After a long while, he finally said slowly, I only ask for peace of mind and righteousness. Heh. Shangguan Lingxiu chuckled coldly. She wanted to ask Yun Yang if he felt that it was ironic to say such words now. It was very classy to say it as a bystander, but what about the person involved, the person who had to bear the brunt of it all? The reason why this incident has continued to ferment is because of the scholars' incessant actions. Yun Yang said slowly. Especially those scholars with ulterior motives, working hard to concoct such things. Shangguan Lingxiu smiled coldly. That's why I'm even more disappointed and heartbroken. If it was only the illiterate people who were incited and led, it would be fine. However, these scholars are well-read and knowledgeable. Don't tell me they don't know the whole story of the case back then. Can't they tell who's right and who's wrong? Why are they still doing this? And it's not just one person, it's a whole bunch of them. A lot of them. Have their consciences been eaten by dogs? Yun Yang said faintly, every one of them is a dog butcher. Most of them are scholars. It's because these people are knowledgeable that they want to stir up some trouble, and they can stir up some trouble. As he spoke, Yun Yang suddenly thought of something and could not help being stunned. A scholar? Watching Yun Yang leave in a hurry, Shangguan Lingxiu pondered for a moment and sighed, going in to check on her nephew's cultivation progress. She wondered, what did Yun Yang remember that made him leave in such a hurry? 9 Heavens dictum, investigate the person who spread the rumor immediately. Where did he go before spreading the rumor? Yun Yang sent out the 9 Heavens dictum again. Yun Yang had already vaguely sensed something from the feedback earlier. Sending out the order now was only to confirm it. As expected, when dawn came, the feedback basically confirmed Yun Yang's guess. A certain scholar was summoned by his master to visit his home. When the other scholars came out, they all started to investigate Zhuo Wenlong's unjust case. A certain official had. The core members of the operation this time are people from the Grand Confucian sects. Those Grand Confucian sects were invited to a banquet by Elder He earlier. Yun Yang's eyes stared at the 2 words old He, not moving for a long time. Supreme Lord Springfrost. I didn't want to mess with you during this period of time. I only wanted to get through this militaristic event safely, but I didn't expect you to destroy the military's foundation from its roots. The Empire of Yutong's military's proudest family, the one that the entire continent's militaries held in awe, was the Shangguan family of generals. Generation after generation of soldiers had enlisted in the military, and the Shangguan family of generals had always been the best subject of publicity. Once there was publicity about the Shangguan family of generals, it was as if the youth of the nation had been injected with adrenaline. That was how the Empire of Yutong's unbreakable military spirit was formed. If the Shangguan family of generals were to be tarnished, or even to have the verdict overturned and their loyal souls turned into traitors, it would be equivalent to removing the backbone of Yutong's military. How cohesive could a nation and people that trampled and cursed the heroes who protected them have? How spirited could they be? Their evil intentions are punishable. They deserve to die. They deserve to die. They will not be forgiven even if they die. Yunyang gritted his teeth. The next day, His Majesty the Emperor came to old Marshal Chio's residence in secret as usual. Yunyang came on time as well. In the study room, Yunyang finished his words calmly. There's actually such a thing among the people? His Majesty the Emperor slammed the table and stood up, anger written all over his face. Chio Jinhan's rage was raging as he growled menacingly. As the first and second most important figures in the Empire of Yutang, how could they not know the destructive force and the severe consequences if these people were to succeed? If this were to happen, the men in the military would lose their faith and fall apart. If the military were to fall apart, where would the country be? A scholar harms the country. This is an act of national subjugation. Chio Jinhan's hair and beard were standing on end. Your Majesty, this cannot be tolerated. Of course it cannot be tolerated. His Majesty the Emperor's expression was cold. Yunyang, do you know who's the mastermind behind this? This nephew really doesn't know who the mastermind is? Yunyang said carefully, actually, the mastermind won't show himself so easily in such a huge matter. This nephew thinks that it's already very impressive to be able to get a rough idea. His Majesty the Emperor and Chio Jinhan instinctively felt that this child was hiding something. Yunyang knew about the mastermind behind this. However, no matter how they asked, Yunyang would not say anything. It was not that Yunyang did not want to get rid of Supreme Lord Springfrost, it was just that now was not the time. Besides, even if he were to say it out loud, His Majesty the Emperor might not do anything to that person. Supreme Lord Springfrost's public identity was He Han-Qing, once His Majesty the Emperor's teacher. Even now, His Majesty the Emperor still respected this person very much. The teacher of 3 emperors, an old official entrusted to him. The leader of the literary world, a grandmaster of a generation. Even His Majesty the Emperor would not dare to do anything to such a person. The impact would be too great. A word of exclamation, the saddest mentality of mankind is to follow blindly. Even though everyone was highly educated, there were still too many incidents of slandering heroes. Moreover, this was a world where most people were illiterate. Chapter 170. Yunyang did not mention it because he wanted His Majesty to investigate it himself. That way the shock would be much stronger than if he said it himself. Besides, there was another more important reason. Supreme Lord Springfrost had been severely injured by Ling Xiaozue and his capability had been diminished, but the 8 experts under him were still terrifyingly capable. If they were forced into a corner, the damage they could cause would be enough to destroy half of Tiantang City. This was a loss that the Empire of Yutang could not afford at the moment. Even if they did, He Han-Qing would have a high chance of leaving safely. This matter? His Majesty frowned. If the Imperial Court were to step in directly, there would definitely be a conflict in the Imperial Court. Besides, it would be making a mountain out of a molehill. It would be easy for others to make a fuss about it. Chio Jinhan's expression was murderous. Don't worry, Your Majesty. Leave this to the military. Yunyang was excited. Then, this nephew will join in the fun and do his best. Scram? Chio Jinhan glared at him. This has nothing to do with you. Yunyang shrunk his neck. He still could not understand how this old man could burn the bridge after crossing it so skillfully. He was indeed the leader of the Empire of Yutang's 3 greatest rogues. How many times had it been? The old marshal had said that it had nothing to do with Yunyang, but Yunyang would never listen to him. The next day he went to the board of military to hide. He planned to watch from a close distance how the old marshal was going to give his orders and resolve this troublesome matter before him. He did not expect Tai Zheng to be there as well. What are you doing here? The old marshal looked at Tai Zheng with a frown. You're getting married the day after tomorrow. Are you here to show your qualities as a soldier or are you here to cause trouble? Tai Zheng was furious. The backbone of the soldiers is almost taken away. How can I be interested in getting married if this matter is not resolved? Old marshal, let me handle this. Chio Jinhan thought about it and said in a low voice, this matter requires killing. You're the bridegroom, it's inauspicious to kill before marriage. Old marshal, you're wrong. Tai Zheng said loudly, this is not only Yutang's matter. The Shangguan family of generals is also a role model for the entire continent's militants. Killing is for the world's militants, what's inauspicious about it? For a soldier to see blood before marriage, this is the proper meaning. If I were to say this is a good thing bestowed upon me by the heavens, an extremely auspicious event. If I really did it, Tai Jing would have the energy to drink too. For the sake of my wedding the day after tomorrow, please don't fight with me today. Tai Jing cupped his fists together and threatened, whoever fights will have no wine to drink. I mean what I say. All the generals were stunned. I have never seen such a shameless person. Did we say that we would fight with you? There was no need to resort to such an extreme method of not giving him wine to drink. What a sinister face. So what if you're a bridegroom? Helpless, the old marshal could only pass the order to Tai Jing. This must be done according to the circumstances, do not overdo it. But it could not be too soft. Get the balance right. Tai Jing laughed. This lowly general understands. He strode away. Yun Yang turned into a gust of wind and returned to the camp first. He concealed himself in the air and knocked Tai Jing's assistant general out with a punch before hiding him under the bed. Then he transformed into the assistant general and walked out neatly with a wave of his aura. He saw Tai Jing whipping his horse over. Call 1,000 men, follow me. At this moment in the city, thousands of scholars were calling in front of the School of Literature. One of them stood on a stage, waving his arms and cheering. His expression was intense and his words were extremely provocative. Many people below were shouting slogans as well. The scene was lively. This place was the cradle of the empire's civil officials, the holy land of learning. Many of the experienced scholars shook their heads and sighed. There were also those who spoke up to dissuade them, but how could they stop the burning emotions? Yutang owes with justice. Can the mighty Yutang not give an explanation to a loyal official? Are we going to be kept in the dark forever? Are our future generations to be kept in the dark as well? We have the right to let the people of the empire know the truth. We have the obligation to seek justice for Zhua. A loyal official should not be wronged. A hero should not be humiliated. Too many high-sounding words came out of the mouths of these scholars. They were so impassioned that even the deaf could hear them. Although these people were physically weak, they were all experts when it came to stirring up the hearts of the people. According to them, the Shangguan family of generals was guilty of the most heinous crimes. Even if there were only orphans and widows left, the number of deaths was still too little. Zhuo Wenlong, the truly treacherous official, had become a saint of the ages. He was so high and mighty, distorting the truth to a terrifying extent. At this moment, the galloping of horses sounded like a thunderstorm. The crowd was in a frenzy. On the other side, the neatly arranged cavalry arrived like a tsunami, quickly surrounding the place. Quite a number of people became timid upon seeing this and quietly slipped away. The cavalry did not stop them. Only those scholars who were full of impassioned words were not allowed to leave. Hundreds of scholars were surrounded around the high platform. There were more than 10 people on the platform and hundreds of people below the platform. The anger on their faces had yet to dissipate, but there was already faint fear and uneasiness in their eyes. Tai Jing sat on his horse, looking at the young scholar on the stage with a menacing gaze. The scholar met his gaze with pride, showing no sign of weakness or fear. Who are you? What are you trying to do by stirring up the people and distorting history? Tai Jing's tone was menacing, his murderous intent unconcealed. This junior does not change his name. I am Sun Wenhua. May I ask Marshal Tai, what is your intention of deploying such a large army to surround so many scholars and coming with such a murderous aura? Sun Wenhua asked in return. You have stirred up the people's hearts, slandered the loyal and good and confused right and wrong. What is your punishment? Tai Jing's gaze was murderous. This junior has never done what Marshal Tai has said. Sun Wenhua said proudly, as a scholar at night, I am only doing what I think is right. He faced the crowd and continued his speech. This junior does not have the strength to truss a chicken. I am only a frail scholar. However, I conduct myself in the ways of a scholar. The so-called way of a scholar is to criticize with words and pen, to write books and write theories to be passed down to future generations, to assist the emperor and pacify the people. This is what I, a scholar with lofty ideals, should do. The group of scholars responded in unison. Many of them who understood the situation sneered inwardly. Slandering the loyal and good, confusing right and wrong, could actually be said to be so righteous? The skin of this bunch of scholars was really thick. Tai Jing clenched his fists. Just as he was about to speak, he heard the assistant general beside him speak first. His voice was so loud that it was deafening. That's right. You scholars have to do things in the manner of scholars. This is logical and understandable. However, we martial men will only do things in the manner of martial men. Since all of you think that it is right for you to remove Yutang's backbone and destroy Yutang's faith, Then we think that killing all of you is right as well. Brothers, charge. Leave no one alive. With a shout, Tai Zheng's assistant general spurred his horse forward without another word. Before Tai Zheng could recover from his shock, he saw the long saber in the assistant general's hand swing and the dozen or so scholars' heads on the stage were sent flying. Not a single one was spared, including Sun Wenlong. The murderous intent in Yun Yang's heart was overwhelming. Reason? Who King reason with you? You've even done something so heartless and infuriating, how can you be reasonable? CKU. Wherever the saber passed, blood spurted into the air. However, the assistant general that Yun Yang had turned into had no intention of stopping. Instead, he sped up and charged into the crowd. His saber was like the devil's weapon. With a few swings, blood flowed like a river. The saber in your father's hand shall send all of you down. Wait for justice with your Sirzua. Under his lead, the cavalrymen who had come with him could no longer hold themselves back. Agitated by the blood-red situation, all of them charged forward at once, following the assistant general's footsteps and brandishing their sabers. Kill? Kill these stards who distort the truth and confuse right and wrong. Kill these traitors. Kill this group of people who are making irresponsible remarks. How dare you insult the family of generals? You deserve to die. Boom, boom, boom. The cavalrymen had only charged once, but all the troublemaking scholars in front of them were already dead. No one was spared. I know who started this. Brothers, follow me. As long as the source of this disaster isn't eliminated, the rumors will never stop spreading and the family of generals will never stop being slandered. The assistant general that Yun Yang had turned into hollered again, leading a group of cavalrymen with bloodshot eyes as they ran away. Tai Zheng finally snapped out of it. CK, who's the main marshal? I was just about to give the order to attack. Why did this start steal the limelight? I haven't even vented my anger yet. Besides, the old marshal had instructed us not to go overboard before we came. Now that everyone had been killed, what was there to consider? CK. Wang Ziki. Tai Zheng roared, where the CK are you going? Your father, stop right there. He urged his horse to chase after Yun Yang. However, Tai Zheng was obviously a step too late. Yun Yang's previous conversation with Shengguan Lingxiu had put himself in her shoes. Even though he had 1,000 words of comfort, his heart was already filled with murderous intent. Now that the opportunity was right before him, how could he let go of the source of trouble? Would it not be a waste of a heaven-sent opportunity if he did not bring his troops to kill to his heart's content? Yun Yang, who was disguised as Tai Zheng's assistant general, Wang Ziki, took the lead and charged towards the few great scholars that he had identified earlier. With a forceful slash of his saber, he charged in from the main entrance and crashed through the back wall before turning around and charging towards another house. With my saber in hand today, I shall slay all the evildoers. The name list in Yun Yang's hand was extremely accurate. He would not kill anyone wrongly nor would he miss anyone. When he was almost done, he turned his horse around and charged back. He bumped right into Tai Zheng, who was fuming with rage. Wang Ziki. How King dare you? Don't King run. Don't run. Stop right there. How could Yun Yang not run? He whipped his horse and galloped even faster. I've been rushing to right until now, my eyes are blurry from exhaustion. It's already past midnight? Alright, time to send it to bed. GT. Chapter 171. It was only after another turn that Tai Zheng caught up to Yun Yang's warhorse, but he was shocked to find that there was no one on the horse's back. T. Tai Zheng shuddered. Could this be a spy? If the people that this person killed were all innocent, then it would really be a monstrous calamity. Not only was he the scapegoat, he was also the real culprit. However, after a few rounds of careful investigation, it was finally confirmed that none of them were innocent. These people were indeed the culprits, the source of this incident. Tai Zheng was at a loss. What was going on? Tai Zheng scratched his head in bewilderment. He could not seem to figure it out no matter how he thought about it. Tai Zheng returned to the campsite in bewilderment and saw Wang Ziki standing at the entrance of the campsite, looking around in bewilderment. Marshal, where have all of you been? Why is there no one in my campsite? What are you playing dumb for? Tai Zheng hopped off his horse in a rage and grabbed someone and gave him a good beating. Only after he was done did he order, tie this bastard up. Wang Ziki's face was swollen and his mouth and nose were bleeding, but he was still calling out, what is this? What is this? This beating was extremely unjust. When Marshal Tai heard the whole story from Wang Ziki and connected the dots, he looked like he was enlightened, but he was actually dumbstruck. Other than feeling frustrated, he could not say anything else. This was because there was no way to report this. How could he not recognize someone who had impersonated as his assistant general? This was the biggest joke in the world. If this had happened on the battlefield, did he know what kind of consequences such a situation would have? The entire army would have been wiped out. Even if he had killed the right person now, what if he had killed the wrong person? Even if he had killed the wrong person, he would not be able to answer for it. How could Tai Jing be so muddle-headed? Tai Jing could imagine the rebuke he would receive if he reported today's incident, so he could only suffer in silence and pretend that nothing had happened. However, he was puzzled. Who was the person who impersonated the assistant general? Could it be old Marshal Chiu who had killed so accurately? Your assistant general is not bad. Not bad at all. Old Marshal Chiu Jianhan was full of praise when he saw Tai Jing handing over the order. Clean and direct like this old man back in the day. Not bad, not bad. He should be rewarded and rewarded handsomely. Tai Jing's face was pale. Do you still know how to be embarrassed? If you say you're going, then you're going. Why are you wasting your breath? Couldn't they just take him down directly? You're still asking them how they should be punished? Can you reason with this bunch of scholars? Since we can use our sabers, then let's cut the crap. Sabers are our forte. After praising Wang Ziki, the old marshal pointed a finger at Tai Jing's nose and scolded, "If it wasn't for that Wang Ziki's decisive action, you'd most likely have been led into a trap. Look at you. Logically speaking, I shouldn't be scolding you on the eve of your wedding, but do you have a pig's brain? A piece of trash like you actually managed to get a wife. How blind must your wife be?" Tai Jing returned to the camp with his tail between his legs. Carrying the order of commendation and promotion for Assistant General Wang Ziki, he was filled with gloom. "Me?" Wang Ziki pointed at his nose that was almost smashed and was surprised. "Commend me? I've been promoted? What? When did I make a contribution again?" Looking at his colleagues around him who were either envious or impressed, Wang Ziki was truly bewildered. "Marshal, this," Tai Jing roared, "shut your F***king mouth. You've been F***king promoted and you're still feeling aggrieved? You've taken advantage of it and you're still acting like you're not? Left and right go." Pow pow pow. Wang Ziki was knocked out, replaced, rewarded for his contribution and then beaten up. The series of events felt like he was in a dream, at a loss for what to do. On the other hand, Yun Yang, the culprit and mastermind of this incident, was overjoyed at the moment. He had slaughtered 200 people to his heart's content today. This was secondary. What moved Yun Yang even more was that Emmy was now in an unprecedentedly active state. Emmy was in an unprecedentedly lively state. It was obvious that it had obtained the chi of injustice that it needed today, and what it had obtained today was exceptionally strong. Initially, Yun Yang had thought that although these scholars had bad intentions and their actions were wrong, they were not to the extent of being deranged and truly wanting to harm the empire of Yutong. Now, it seemed that these scholars had become villains in the truest sense of the word. The air of injustice that Emmy had gathered was already irrefutable evidence. Actually, these people who created trouble all knew clearly that the Shangguan family of generals were the true heroes. Although they knew what the truth was, they still chose to do so. Their intentions were more than just biased. These people's actions had stirred up the entire military and even most of the common people's sense of injustice. That's probably why there's so much air of injustice this time. Yun Yang pondered. That's right. The more such people are, the more they deserve to die. They clearly know what the truth is, but to achieve their goals, they still muddle black and white and confuse right and wrong. If they don't deserve to die, who will? Yun Yang snorted. If I see such people again in the future, I'll kill every single one of them. I don't have so much time to talk nonsense with them. Even history had to be twisted. The more knowledgeable these fellows were, the greater the harm they would cause. Yun Yang had not been merciful this time. If there were similar encounters in the future, he would only be more ruthless and vicious. Of course, it was impossible for Lord Supreme Cloud to appear personally. He had borrowed someone else's hand and gifted them a great merit. It was the reward for borrowing, a reward that could temporarily replace his own. Deputy General Wang Ziki, who was very lucky, received a great merit in a confused manner. He was beaten up and even made a scapegoat for it. Actually, it was not exactly a scapegoat. Even if Yun Yang had not done so, he would still have had to go on a mission. On that very day, before the civil officials could organize a counterattack, denouncing the military's lawlessness and how the nation would be destroyed if they were not punished severely. His Majesty's imperial edict had already been announced to the world. I've heard that scholars use literature to disobey the law, while chivalrous men use martial arts to violate the law. Today Yutang scholars can't tell right from wrong, distort right and wrong, disregard loyalty, speak without thinking, erase the loyal and good and promote the treacherous. How are such actions different from treacherous officials? The Shangguan family of generals is loyal and loyal. Yutang's land and rivers have all witnessed their loyal souls. The entire family has sacrificed themselves for the nation, sacrificing their lives for the nation. Such a large family has been decimated, to the point where only widows and children remain. Their desire to serve the nation never wavers. The loyal and virtuous officials who have given their entire family for the nation are maligned as treacherous officials. Where's the justice? Where's the conscience? It's been 150 years, the bones of the loyal officials have yet to turn cold, their souls have yet to leave, but they've suffered such slander that confuses right and wrong, distorts right from wrong. How can they rest in peace in the netherworld? A group of scholars are well-read, they should know right from wrong, they should share the nation's burdens, they should be known for their loyalty. Yet, for their inexplicable selfishness, they've committed treacherous acts that incite resentment among the people, chill the souls of the loyal and good, and hurt the hearts of the martyrs. Heaven and earth cannot tolerate this. This crime cannot appease the people's anger if they are not killed, it cannot appease the souls of the loyal if they are not punished. From today onwards, all those who speak of this again shall have their entire families executed. Yutang scholars should take this as a warning. The blood of the loyal souls shall be left in the annals of history, their names shall be remembered for generations to come, the lawbreakers shall not be condemned. His Majesty's imperial edict this time was extraordinarily strict. Through the imperial edict, one could clearly see His Majesty's ashen face, his furious expression and his soaring murderous intent. As the imperial edict was announced to the world, the storm subsided at once. As for His Majesty's order to pursue the matter, all the scholars in Tiantang City who had been involved in this incident were collectively doomed. Those who are already dead deserve to be punished, their families must be held accountable for their crimes. Those who were lucky enough to escape with their lives shall be recorded in the Iron Scroll and shall not be employed for the rest of their lives. As the saying went, 10 years as a prefect was worth 100,000 taels of silver. Many of them studied diligently, even using all sorts of channels to make a name for themselves and gain fame, all so that they could enter the imperial examinations one day and become officials in the imperial court. Once this imperial edict was issued, it was equivalent to cutting off these people's future as officials. Cries of anguish could be heard everywhere at once. His Majesty's action was swift and decisive. He had issued the imperial edict immediately after the killings. The mastermind's men had all been killed. Even if they wanted to stir up trouble, they could not do anything about it. They could only swallow their grievances and be helpless. There was no way they could retaliate or turn the situation around. 90% of their useful subordinates had been killed by these murderers. The rest had their futures ruined and were full of resentment. There was no one they could use. What was the use of stirring up trouble in the imperial court? Besides, His Majesty was in a fit of rage, his eyes were green with rage. If they were to jump out and cause trouble, they might be killed along with the rest. Therefore, the civil officials knew better than to call out His Majesty's wisdom and let the matter rest. Another edict was issued alongside the imperial edict. It was His Majesty's consolation to the Shangguan family of generals. 2 old marshals of the military had personally gone forth to send consolation gifts to the Shangguan residents with loud gongs and drums. The commotion was so great that it shook the entire city. Countless people who had been incited were remorseful, weeping bitterly as they went to the Shangguan family of generals' door to kneel and apologize. Their voices were tearful and sincere, their faces and hearts filled with remorse. The Shangguan family finally welcomed a bright sky after a few days of extreme humiliation. A large group of people knelt in front of the Shangguan family's door. I deserve to die, I've thrown rotten eggs. It's all those scholars' fault, they spouted nonsense. I deserve to die too, I actually believed them. I hate myself, I can't even read a single word, yet I followed others to cause trouble. I really deserve to die. I beg for the family of generals forgiveness. I beg for the family of generals forgiveness. This lowly one was confused. In spite of this, no one from the Shangguan family came forward to accept the apology, nor did they have the slightest intention of consoling them. Only the residence's butler came out to say, There are only women and children in the house. It's not convenient for me to greet you personally. Please leave as soon as possible, everyone. I apologize for my lack of hospitality." That was all he said, nothing else. However, the indifference in those words and the feeling of being disheartened lingered in everyone's hearts. The crowd was at a loss, feeling that something was wrong, but they could not put their finger on it. They only hesitated in front of the Shangguan family's door. There were also people who were infuriated. "We've only misunderstood you, we've apologized and said we're sorry, what more do you want?" Old Marshal Qiu and Leng Daoyin came to the entrance of Shangguan residence together. Seeing so many people gathered around the residence, they thought that something had happened. It was only when they hurried over to ask what had happened that they found out what had happened. Looking at the Shangguan family of generals' door that was smeared with filth and there was even clear feces on it, the stench still lingering. Looking at the group of people who had come to ask for forgiveness after doing something wrong, Qiu Jianhan was furious. The old marshal strode to the Shangguan family's door and leaped up to the top of the door, cursing with his finger pointed. "You bunch of bastards, you actually have the face to come here and apologize? Can you be any more shameless? Human. You should at least have a bottom line." For over 150 years, the Shangguan family of generals has sacrificed generations of men for the empire of Yutang's stability. Now there are only widows and orphans left. You bunch of protected people who have enjoyed peace and joy, yet you've been biased and listened to those ridiculous rumors, causing trouble and besieging the family of generals. Do you even have a shred of conscience? You've chilled the heart of a family of generals. You've said all sorts of nasty things and done all sorts of embarrassing things. Now that you know the whole story, do you think it's over just by coming here to kowtow, apologize and show your remorse? Dream on, you bunch of ungrateful bastards. The entire Shangguan family of generals has been bathed in blood and killed on the battlefield for generations, dying on the battlefield. What they've protected is only a bunch of heartless bastards like you. Apologize. Repent. How dare you say that? Looking at all of you, I feel indignant for the Shangguan family of generals' brothers who have sacrificed themselves on the battlefield. Bathed in blood and killed on the battlefield, generations of people have been loyal and devoted. Yet they've only protected a bunch of ingrates like you. Ungrateful, ungrateful, shameless. Despicable, shameless, lowly, despicable, despicable. Have you heard the cries of the loyal souls of the family of generals in the netherworld? Have you seen the wrath of the loyal souls of righteous blood? Is it not worth it? With something like this happening, how can you expect the warriors to be willing to fight with their lives on the line? Could it be that they've risked their lives on the battlefield just to protect you lot? Who do you think you are? Chapter 172. The old marshal's hair and beard were bristling, his rage unquenchable. His deafening roar was laced with intense rage, but there was also a sense of powerless sorrow hidden within. The old marshal's current state of mind was similar to Shangguan Lingxiu and Yun Yang's, perhaps even more so. He could lead an army of 1,000,000 men and defend against the enemy from 1,000 miles away. He could command his troops with ease. He could also charge into the enemy's formation and lead the army bravely without fear. However, he was filled with a sense of helplessness when faced with these fickle and easily instigated fools. To the old marshal, it was a blessing that the Shangguan family of generals' name had been washed clean today, but it was also a wake-up call that grieved for the loss of their kind. Today it could be the Shangguan family of generals, but tomorrow could a few words be spoken against Leng Daoyin and Qiu Jianhan? They were all soldiers after all. Even the Shangguan family of generals, a family of meritorious and loyal souls, had almost been annihilated. What was he? In the backyard of the Shangguan residence, a family of widows stood quietly, all of them expressionless. Hearing the old marshal's thunderous roar, the eyes of the entire family were rimmed red, tears streaming down their cheeks. Their fists were clenched tight, the grief and indignation they felt could not be expressed in words. When they were being pointed at by the public, they had not shed tears of sadness, they had only felt indignation. Now that the truth had been clarified and their reputation had been restored, they could not help the tears that flowed freely. The old mistress lit a stick of incense shakily and raised it above her head, gently inserting it into the censer before the memorial tablets. Green smoke billowed. The memorial tablets were arranged neatly, watching the rising smoke in silence. Those who were alive and those who were dead, they were all silent. All the women's eyes were focused on the old mistress. There was no emotion on the old mistress' face, but her tears continued to fall. She straightened her body quietly, tears streaming down her cheeks as she stared at the memorial tablets. After a long time the old mistress murmured, "I know what all of you want to say. You want to say that all of you seek peace of mind and justice. This is what all of you want to say, isn't it? I know that your entire family is made up of scum like this. Even if you die 100 times you won't regret it." Her voice gradually trembled. "You guys are happy. Let out a loud roar, charge forward and die a heroic death. Die once and for all and it will be extremely satisfying. But you've made us stay. You have peace of mind and righteousness. You died for your country without any regrets. But do you really not feel guilty at all for leaving us orphans and widows behind? If you die, everything will be over. You won't know anything. But we're still alive, so we deserve to suffer all of this." Old Madam's tears flowed down her cheeks as she suddenly shouted, "But why should we bear all of this?" She pointed her skinny hand at the door behind her and shouted, "Why do we have to bear all this? One of you come out and tell me, what right do you have?" The entire morning hall suddenly trembled at the sound of this question. The eyes of all the women in the family turned red and their bodies trembled. Qiu Jinhan's heavy voice came from outside the door. "Sister-in-law, we're here." The old mistress said coldly, "The two marshals have come personally and graced us with your presence. However, your feet do not step on this lowly ground. How can I accept such treatment? A family of orphans and widows can't bear the courtesy of two important military officials coming to visit personally. Please return." The door darkened as Qiu Jianhan and Leng Daoyin's tall frame appeared at the door and strode forward. Coming before old madam, both of them knelt on the ground with a loud thud. "We've come late. Forgive us, sister-in-law." Two marshals of the imperial court, veterans of the military, old generals who could shake the entire empire of Yutong with a single shout, knelt before old madam obediently, their faces filled with guilt. Old madam's breath was stuck in her throat. She did not speak for a long time. After a while, she finally sighed softly. The cane in her hand paused for a moment as she said, "Get up." "Yes. Allow the both of us to offer incense to the family of generals' forefathers, brothers, and children as a token of our appreciation." Qiu Jianhan and Leng Daoyin stood up and retrieved a pot of incense each respectfully. They lit the incense and raised it reverently, bowing meticulously as they went forward. Their expressions were unprecedentedly solemn. There was a faint glint in the eyes of the two old marshals. It was as if the Shangguan family of generals' long-awaited valiance that dominated the battlefield and was unrivaled in the world flashed before their eyes at this very moment. The hall was silent. After some time the two old generals straightened up. Old madam was still standing straight. She suddenly sighed and said softly, "Xiao Qiu Xiao Leng. I ask you." She was expressionless and her voice was cold, without the slightest bit of emotion. She slowly extended her hand and pointed outside. She said indifferently, "Could it be that our family has been bathed in blood and killing for generations just to protect this group outside?" Old Marshal Qiu and Leng Daoyin were silent at the same time. After a long while, both of them straightened their chests and said bitterly but resolutely, "We, the Yutong soldiers, eat the imperial court salary and enjoy the offerings of the people. Our rations and pay are all provided by the country. What we seek is for the peace of our hearts and the presence of righteousness. Nothing else." The two old generals spoke in unison. "What we seek is for the peace of our hearts and the presence of righteousness." It was these two sentences again. These two sentences were truly impassioned and could be used in any way. Old madam was suddenly enraged. Tears gushed out of her eyes as she cursed, "You seek this too, don't you? Peace of your hearts and the presence of righteousness? Good, good, good. You are so righteous, you are so impassioned. Get out. Get out. Go to peace of your hearts. Go to righteousness. Get out. Get out. Get out." As she cried and cursed, the walking stick in her hand came crashing down on the two old generals. The two old generals endured it without moving, their gazes filled with heartache and sorrow. They could empathize with the Shangguan family's plight. The boundless chill in their hearts, the chill in their bodies. Poof. Old madam threw her walking stick on the ground and suddenly knelt before the memorial tablets, bawling her eyes out. Endless heartache and sorrow poured out amidst her sorrowful cries. Countless memorial tablets remained still amidst the smoke. Qiu Jianhan and Leng Daoyin stood still as well. All the women of the Shangguan family did not move. Each of them looked sorrowful, but there was also a sense of relief. What we seek is for the peace of our hearts and the presence of righteousness. There was still a second part to this sentence. That's enough. Yun Yang, who did not know the subsequent developments on the other side, returned to his residence in high spirits, feeling refreshed. He was surprised to find out that Yun Zuyu had sent someone to deliver an invitation, saying that there was something urgent for him to attend to. Yun Yang could not help being stunned when he heard the news. Why would Yun Zuyu look for him at this time? What was her intention? Just as he was about to head out to Sira's house to investigate, he saw a young girl dressed in green walking over quickly, accompanied by 2 burly men. It was Ju Qin, one of the 12 golden hairpins of Sira's house. Although she was not familiar with Yun Yang, they knew each other. Young Master Yun. Ju Qin's pretty face was smiling. Sister Yu knows that young Master Yun is busy and will not be meeting at Sira's house this time. She has sent this young sister to welcome you. Yun Yang smiled. That is fine. May I know where Sister Yu is now? Ju Qin smiled and said, Sister Yu is waiting for young Master at a fun place. She hopes that young Master will head there quickly. A fun place? Head there quickly? Yun Yang's eyes scanned Ju Chen's face thoughtfully and nodded. Since Sister Yu has summoned us, let us go now. He turned and waved his hand, greeting her as usual. However, he shot a look at Fang Mafei. Fang Mafei lowered his head and said, Young Master, do you want this subordinate to go with you? No need. What are you going to do? Lao Mei looked after the house. Yun Yang rejected him and said, Stay at home and look after the house. The moment they departed, Yun Yang suddenly whistled. Whitey too sprinted over and jumped into Yun Yang's embrace. Yun Yang laughed and stuffed Whitey too deeper into his pocket before following Ju Qin. Fang Mafei waited for Yun Yang to leave before he chuckled and vanished into thin air. Lao Mei, I'll go first, you go second. Don't be discovered lest you ruin young Master's setup. Lao Mei snorted and muttered angrily, Now you're the one arranging for me. Don't you have any sense of first come, first served? He followed Fang Mafei with an annoyed expression. The sky was already turning dark. It was already dusk. Ju Qin led the way in front, smiling like a blooming flower as she chatted with Yun Yang. The 2 guards followed beside her expressionlessly. Why do these 2 look so unfamiliar? I guess we haven't met before? Yun Yang said with a smile, looking at the 2 guards. Ju Qin chuckled with her hand covering her mouth. Does young Master know everyone in Sira's house? Yun Yang laughed. Not bad, not bad. There are so many people in Sira's house, how could I know them all? Yun Yang did not speak anymore, but each time his gaze swept past Ju Qin, there was an additional chill in the depths of his gaze. You know everyone in Sira's house? That's right, I know everyone in Sira's house. Not just the guards, even the maids and cooks. I know every single one of them, every single one of them. His hands were still in his sleeves as he walked leisurely, like a rich young master who was accompanying a beauty out for a stroll. He exuded an indescribable sense of carefreeness and elegance. Ju Chen's beautiful eyes occasionally glanced at Yun Yang's face, and she could not help but feel a tinge of pity. It was such a pity that such a gentle young master, whose looks and aura were 1 in a million, the further they walked, the more secluded they became. They were getting closer to the red light district. Looking from afar, the people on the streets had become densely packed in the evening. Finally, after turning a corner on a dirty street, both sides of the road were filled with hawkers who had set up stalls. How could there be so many people setting up stalls here at this hour? The corners of Yun Yang's lips curled into a smile as he asked, seemingly unintentionally, Ju Qin, where are you taking me? Why would Sister Yu come to a place like this? What's so fun about a place like this? Ju Qin forced a smile and said, Young Master, don't be so anxious. We have already arrived. Arrived? Yun Yang turned to point at the street. This is it? How is this place fun? Seeing Yun Yang turn, Ju Chen's petite body suddenly retreated swiftly as she hollered, Do it. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.